Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 208. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comic forums, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. The fat one is dying from her weapon. Come save him if you can. So says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of you-know.
How's it going, eh?
White Canary, Birds of Prey #1. We have to talk about this book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This episode we're going to do, it's going to be like kind of a half and half. We're actually getting 2 episodes out of the content that we were ready to release recently. I delayed it a day because when you and I were talking, Jim, we both agreed that we wanted to talk some current books, as well as that we had JLA and Avengers ready to go. When we recorded with issue 1 with Kent of JLA Avengers, we actually recorded it in 2 segments that evening. So there was a natural breaking point. So what I'm doing here is we're going to do Birds of Prey #1, some listener emails, voicemails, that type of stuff, and then jump back to JLA Avengers #1. And then the next episode's going to be a Speeding Bullet style show because you and I have a whole bunch of stuff that we want to talk about of recent releases over the last month or so, and then JLA Avengers. We tried to figure out a way to make sure that we were getting to some of the current material while we were doing these explorations of older material. So it'll be nice because these next couple episodes will have like some balance of a little bit of A, a little bit of B, and some listener content as well, which will be a lot of fun to get to. So I'm kind of excited for that. I'm really excited to talk Birds of Prey, which is, I think that's really what it is driving this. You and I are like chomping at the bit to talk about this book, but a lot of other great books really came out over the last 3 weeks and 4 weeks to talk about as well. So our sponsors for this episode are ComicCollectorLive.com. ComicCollectorLive.com, your comic book management source. Want to remind everyone you can hear us every week on Get Your Geek On Radio. That's GetYourGeekOnRadio.com, a radio station committed to making geek chic. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Also sponsoring us this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can check out Birds of Prey #3, written by Gail Simone, art by Ed Bennis, cover by Cliff Chang. The explosive first story arc of Birds of Prey continues. Pursued by an unstoppable killer, the birds are forced to run a gauntlet of insane gang members and corrupt cops out to kill them, all while trying to stop a teammate from dying in front of their eyes. The meanest Birds of Prey villain yet is calling for blood and won't stop until she gets it. Regularly $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. DCBService.com is your pre-order source. Definitely in this day and age when comic books are getting more and more expensive, you're going to want to check out DCBService.com to get those discounts. Also sponsoring us is InStockTrades.com, where you can check out Batman the Cult. After we're done with JLA Avengers, we're going to Batman the Cult. Regularly $19.99, 47% off, only $10.59. Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson. This is a masterpiece. Thank you, InStockTrades.com, for supporting us with those incredible discounts. Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, we are a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth in the plot line, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're reviewing. So if we're going over something you haven't read, you may want to come back later so you could better enjoy the show.
Jim, I want to give a shout-out to the film Hero Tomorrow. It's herotomorrow.com. If you guys haven't seen this one, it's a very cool independent film that's been released. It's out. We got to see a preview screener copy of the thing, and it's about this comic creator who creates this character called Apama. The cool thing about the story, though, is as the story's fleshing out and we see this man trying to determine what is the best course of his life, we get to see some great relationships with his girlfriend who works at a comic shop. And she's this well-rounded girl who's trying to find her place in life as well and trying to defend him in the process. It's just an amazing, cool film because you see people that are at that stage we've all been at where you're at that transition period. Like, you know, I've been here. I want to get here. And is this the right path for me? And that's part of the fun of the journey is kind of journeying along with them, trying to find what the right path of your life is, and them finding out that what they thought was the right path of their life wasn't exactly the right direction. It's a very cool film as you go through. And check out their site because there's a lot of previews and trailers. We're going to do a segment upcoming on the show about this film just because I think there is something about it that really ties into the comic book community. And I'd like to see some people, if you haven't checked this film out, it's a cool independent comic film that's out there. So it's herotomorrow.com.
Holy caffeine!
Jim, it was so funny. When I was trying to figure out what we were going to do first, if we were going to do our Speeding Bullets segment, because we have a lot of books we want to talk about, or Birds of Prey #1, I was like, oh, there's been so many books that I want to talk about over here, but then there's birds.
Yeah.
So I, of course, had to go with birds. It's so good to be able to have this book back and to be able to have a chance to talk about what is so great about Birds of Prey being back.
All I gotta say is, the birds are back in town, the birds are back in town.
What in the world is that?
Instead of boys are back in town, the birds.
That didn't even sound like that. I didn't even pick up the tune. That was like an elevator version of The Boys Are Back in Town.
Which is why that didn't become today's spoiler warning.
I'm so glad. Gail Simone is the writer. Ed Bennis is the artist. Nei Ruffino is the colorist. Swans did letters. Janelle Siegel editor. Ed Bennis and Nei Ruffino on the covers. And Cliff Chang did the variant cover on this book. And, here's the funny part. When I was thinking about Birds of Prey, this is a series that has always been very important to me. And I was super excited about the book since the announcement. I mean, it's Gail Simone returning to the characters that I loved, her writing so much. I thought it was going to be a top-tier book in my reading list. I had no idea it would blow away my expectations, though. This was actually, I'm like, whoa. I felt like I did when I first read her on Birds, where it was like something like, it was like, who is this writer? And, wow, does she totally get this? And all that type of thing. I had that experience again, and I didn't expect that. I expected it just to be, great. And I don't mean any of that as a knock. I expected it to be top tier, exactly what it was. I didn't expect it to kick to 11, though. And this did. I mean, it was just like, I was like, whoa. It felt like coming home again, yet it felt like an evolution as well. And that was something to me that was surprising and thrilling because I am like so excited for the next issue of this book in a way that I knew it was going to be, but it's something more. It's something, I don't know if I'm making any sense there. This was so beyond what I expected it to be.
Oh, amen, amen, my brother, testify. I tell you, gotta had the same type of wow reaction. Though mine was a little bit more of whoa kind of thing, but that's just a little bit me. One of the things that really just blew me away in reading this was we have a lot of these just inner dialogues that kind of give a background to characters and their interactions with each other. And normally when I read a book, I see, the writers will throw in their stuff for the new readers, stuff for, the people who may not be as familiar with, the characters, and just to let them know what it is. And normally when I'm reading it, I see it, I note it in my head. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of neat. I like when they do that, because you can't just write as if everybody knows everything. You got to do some little stuff in there to bring everybody up to speed. But when I was reading Birds, it didn't feel like let me tell the new readers what's going on. It was so meshed in with the story that I read it as if it was part of the story and not something, something that it wasn't. That was something that just really got me going, wow, that was my kick up to 11.
Can I explain why that worked so well for me? Because when you're saying that, I'm like, this is so totally it, and I get why. For me, what it was is the inner dialogue was not only telling us where the characters are now, it was setting a mood and a tone where mentally they are now. Those of us who've been reading these characters since the series was, canceled, and canceled is a strong word because I totally feel this is a series that was ended for storytelling reasons. So there's a huge difference between that and canceling it. It was canceled, but I mean, a lot of times when you talk about canceling a book, you're saying like, the book didn't have enough readership and that type of, that wasn't why Birds was canceled. Birds was actually ended and canceled for a storytelling purpose. Now there's a reason to bring these characters back, and I love this because now I want to know where they've been in the last year and how where they've been has affected who they are now. And I'm so glad this kicked off with Black Canary because to me, she was the one right out of the starting gate. I've been reading her. And I so wanted to see that the events in the last, year and a half, whatever, with her have kind of pushed her in a new place, a new direction, and helped her re-examine herself and where she wants to go from here. And I love that. That was the part where I was chomping at the bit with the inner dialogue, was to get to see her be the strong, inner, the thing that makes Black Canary so cool is just her strength and the fact that she has this never quit attitude, and she's got an edge about her. Yet she's rational. She's probably, to me, one of the most well-rounded on the team. As far as the most balanced, like, she knows who she is now because she's been through so much in her life, good and bad and otherwise. And a lot of that is due to her relationship with Green Arrow. And, you know, when you go through a relationship where something goes horribly wrong, and in her case, there's been a lot of horribly wrongs in her history with Green Arrow, and not just Green Arrow, other relationships as well. She's had relationships with characters like Ra's al Ghul and things like that. Those relationships, you take those things with you. And you become a stronger person because of those relationships. You learn from them. You learn about who you are and what you will do to move on from adversity. She's done that repeatedly in her life. And we see her come through stronger every single time. And we're seeing that here. And I think that's what I really liked about it. It's also, I want to say, what else is like blowing me away about the book, besides the stellar writing and evolution of writing, because we see Gail Simone grow in the time that she's been away from birds as a writer. And that's, to me, the sign of a true artist, is when you see them grow. So to see her come back to this right now, and I guess that was something that wasn't clicking with me when I heard it was, I'm like, oh yeah, the birds are back, it's great, we're going to be getting more of those great stories than before. I didn't take into account the fact that she would have grown as a writer in that time, so we're seeing a more advanced writer now on this book. So now the book has like kicked up another level, which that was the part of, I guess that's what I was trying to say early on. That's what has worked for me. Ed Benes and the colors by Nia Ruffino, because the mood and tone and atmosphere right from the first page straight on through. In Iceland, that, you know, I mean, there's very little light sourcing except from the night sky. And you want to find the right balance of setting that like dark, mysterious tone and mood to it without losing the great visuals of the characters in there as well. This is really a cool creative team, and we've seen an evolution of Ed Benes too, from where he was when he was first on Birds of Prey. So to me, it's like this whole team has grown from various work that they've done, and putting this team together and having them work on this book now, it's like, this is a whole new book for me. And I'm so glad it's a relaunched series, because I really do feel like this is something fresh and new and different. Yeah, they're the same characters being brought together. And yeah, Hawk and Dove are a nice addition. But honestly, even if I love Hawk and Dove being in here, so don't take this the wrong way. If you took Hawk and Dove out, I still feel that this book would feel just as fresh and new from the characters that we're used to, like Black Canary and Huntress and Zinda and, of course, you know, Barbara Gordon, because there is so much this sense of there's growth, maturity in the characters and the creative team, and it seems like everybody's coming home, yet there's something more.
Oh yeah, amen. With especially your comments on like the coloring and the inking and just the usage of the shadows. You know, you could very easily have done too much shadows, too much overplay, and lost a lot of these great visual aspects just of, you know, the facial expressions, the, you know, combat sequencing, and just all of that. But this is a nice blending of it. They, you know, went with some darker pigments, a little bit darker colors on the stuff, so you still see that it is a nighttime and it is quickly losing the light, but you don't lose the beautiful artwork. And that was something I really was just, especially in these opening sequences, I was really just impressed by that. And that was something I was like, dang, this is just, everybody's firing on all cylinders. You know, I'm laughing going, man, Secret Six now has competition for my number one spot. I'm gonna be honest with you right now. Birds of Prey won this month. It did. Just by a slight edge, because there was something about, I think it was so much the emotional value, the emotional connection these characters had this issue. Seeing them come back, there were moments, I'm not going to be afraid to admit, there were moments where I almost like had a tear in my eye with some of the dialogue in this book, because it was about who, you know, how do you, when you're with characters, they felt so much like guys in the sense that they were so afraid to express the emotion that they all wanted to express. You know what I mean? Like, they all want to express, dude, like, it's so cool to be back together again. We all love this. We've all needed this from where we've been. Yet they can't, because they're heroes and because of what they do and because they need to be so strong all the time. It was so hard for them to drop that guard and do that in those moments that I was like, I'm so relating to all of them. And I'm not saying they felt like guys. They really are, you know, females, and I love that element of them. But it's one of the cool things about these characters is they are so easy to relate to, whether it's a male audience or a female audience. And I'm going to totally say to anybody out there, if you're avoiding this book, if you're, you know, a male reader and you're like, I don't know, you know, I usually, you know, like,
I like your Batman, I like your Superman, I like your Green Arrow. I tend to avoid, like Wonder Woman or Birds of Prey because, I don't tend to follow female characters that much. Oh, you're doing yourself such a disservice. This is right now, this month, this was my favorite book this month, hands down. And honestly, the month's not over yet. Boy, good luck trying to top this one for me.
Yeah.
Because it was, whoa. It wasn't a hard decision as far as what was my favorite book, because I did not expect it to take me in a place where I didn't expect it. I had my own mind set on what I thought this was going to be, and it was so totally beyond that. Yay. This in Iceland, this whole little thing, the quest for the girl, and it's an Icelandic, was royal family. Is that what it was? That was diplomats that were taken. Their daughter was taken, and she was on a rescue mission. And I love this whole sense of connecting with sin and the fact that she had an adopted daughter, a daughter that she was taking care of, and this connected with her so much of that, like, if you've harmed a hair on that girl's head, you are in so much trouble for this. It was a mother, being in that moment, connecting with, you better not have touched that girl. I loved that feel with her. There was a confidence to her the entire time in the dialogue and in the visuals that I really needed. Because you need to get behind that. And you're like, okay, I would take a back seat and I would follow Black Canary, and I'd feel pretty darn safe being with her right now. Oh, yeah. Because this woman knows she can hold her own. She laid out there were 4 soldiers, and then there was one American who she quickly analyzed and said, this guy's nuts. All he cares about is his name being on television. And he is willing, for the fame, to cross horrible, unimaginable. I mean, to threaten to shoot. He wasn't just threatening to shoot a child. She was pretty darn convinced that no matter what way this went down, he's shooting that kid anyway.
Oh, yeah. I really liked her analysis, the battlefield analysis you talked about, where she's sitting there and she's breaking down each of the targets, looking at which one is where's the viable threat, where's the largest threat. But it wasn't just a analyzing of a threat to her. It was a threat to the child. And that's where I thought was a cool moment. We see the true veteran hero. We always talk about the heroes who, protection of the innocent, the protection of the civilians is always your number one priority. You see that really in her dialogue. She's seeing all the big goons, all the money, all the guns and everything like that, but it's really this guy who is the threat to that child. That's where her focus is. She knows that's the mission at hand. That kid is getting off this rock safely. And I loved seeing that in her. Because it's that, as we say, it's a veteran hero, true hero moment, and that strong, powerful character that is Black Canary, that I was just eating this up.
I used Google Translate to try and translate some of the dialogue. And while I did not get a direct translation, I did take a look at like the first panel, and clearly it was going in there. He's kind of heckling her a bit, with the snowmobiles and that type of thing. It really is a big power play. He's at this moment trying to intimidate her. And she's making sure she doesn't drop her guard, and her responses are clearly, calling him names like a piece of blah or something like that, as a way to show her own power in there. He talks about, did you bring the money? And she really seems to be referencing that I don't talk to underlings. I need to talk to the big boss. And, everything that she's doing is about not losing her sense of power. Because you take a look at him, size-wise, he's totally able to, if you from a visual intimidation standpoint, if she shows any signs of cracking in there, he is going to manipulate that. It's very clear that this guy has done that before, especially from the dialogue where we learn from Dinah that this guy, his wives have gone missing, mistresses have gone missing. This is a guy right now that has no respect for females, no respect for female life. He really feels that they are expendable to his needs. So she knows that I have got to be very careful how I trend here. And she doesn't want a battle with them to start before she knows the girl's safe. That's really an important dilemma here, because you sit there and say, well, why isn't she kicking butt? She isn't kicking butt because she knows I have got to – that's something where I got a lot of respect for her here in this moment, because this is a veteran, and we're seeing her make a veteran move, a veteran handling of the situation. Why do you send one person in? Because you want to look like – want them to feel that they're comfortable and in control, yet that this is somebody they should respect. So she can get through the necessary hoops to get to where she needs to be in order to carry the plan further. I loved that with this. I loved following the plan. 24, I've mentioned repeatedly on the show and joking, that the fact of being canceled, I'd blow up the world and that type of thing. But one of the things I do like about that show and I enjoy watching is when we see tactical situations, following through the steps and seeing just how smart it is and how careful you have to be to balance insane people and not push them in a way you don't want them to go. It's okay to manipulate and tug them in certain directions, which she's doing here, because she's doing a definite manipulation here and a definite playing of puppet master as far as let me move these guys into play where I need them to be so I can make my final move in endgame and call in my backup squad to finally handle this situation. Very cool how this all played out. That was something, what a great opening. It felt like in my favorite James Bond movies, that opener before the credits, where you get that moment where you're like, oh, yay! And I'm talking about the absolute best ones, when you're going back through, how you can go back and watch that whole sequence of events and go, and sometimes those are even better than the rest of the movie. And, and I'm a huge James Bond fan, but sometimes that opening bit is like the killer one. This was so good in how it played out like that.
Oh, yeah. And I tell you, it was funny. With my Icelandic translator wasn't as accurate as yours, apparently, because that opening sequence between them, I translated that as him saying, "How you doing?"
Wow.
Bad joke, I admit it.
No, I knew where you're going with that. Did you actually try to translate it?
I did actually try to translate it, and I was having not a lot of luck. And then so I figured, let me jump online and do some searching, because I figured maybe somebody out there would have translated it and put it out there in the vast cosmos that is the internet. And I struck out there, and it was
Did you check
just
her forums?
Say again?
Did you check her forums? You'll all be sorry.
No.
I'm going to go there next. I like the puzzle of doing it myself. It's funny, we talk in the JLA Avengers about puzzles and how I'm like got those meticulous ends where I've got to have that piece of the puzzle and I like to do it myself. I'm not done trying to translate it myself yet. But, when I eventually get to that point where I'm like, okay, I've done as much as I possibly can, I'm going to go I'm sure somebody on her forums has probably already done this. I want to do it myself first. I can't recommend enough the You'll All Be Sorry forums and the Wonder Woman forum that she has. They're actually linked into our show. I don't always get a chance to post on there as much as I get to go on there and read the posts, but it's a wonderful forum group. And if you're looking for another forum community to join into, besides ours, of course, you want to definitely check out hers because it's very cool. It's just a great group of people. And we had a chance to hang out with some of them in Chicago, some of the forum members that we got to meet at basically at Geno's East, and it was very cool. It's always such a nice, wonderful group of people. We have Chasco talking about this idea that he wants to get the diplomats that you were talking about to murder themselves on television. They're trying to use the daughter as a leveraging point. Will the parents give their lives for their daughter? Again, I'm going back to the idea that he would shoot her regardless. That little girl's dead.
Yeah, well, even Dinah had that great analysis she did. She was like, if he's got a 5-year-old kid in this godforsaken weather with nothing but her jammies on, he doesn't give a crap about her life. And right there, that was a great just statement, assessment of where this kid's at, what she's got to do. She now knows the kid's dead. She's got to, fight to save the child, not fight to capture the bad guy.
Calls in Zinda, and that great one page when we see first of all the helicopter coming up behind, but then of course just the sequence where we actually see the title page and Endrun, I should say. I'm inventing all kinds of new words this episode.
Yes.
When we do end run at that opening sequence there, I'm like, whoa, her confident smile there again. You're in a situation right now where you've got 4 guys who are soldiers. You've got a little girl in a life or death situation, but now his gun is away from her. So she's seeing things play out the way she was hoping they would. And again, this only increases Black Canary's confidence. It just shows that she's analyzing the battlefield. And really, who wouldn't get more confident when your game plan is working? And that's something that I really particularly enjoyed about the whole thing. This leads to, of course, we're seeing her. They talk about her being an expert at hand-to-hand combat. Well, doggone it, I want to see it now. Yeah. and we do. We see her start taking this guy apart, this lunatic. And to me, it's even more impressive when you see somebody with martial arts skills going up against somebody is just down and out crazy. Because crazy people aren't going to fight fair. They aren't going to think about fighting fair. They're going to think about maiming, hurting, doing whatever they've got to do at that point. And she takes this guy with little to no problem at all.
Dude, because she destroyed him.
Yeah.
She gave him a Theismann. I'm like, dang.
And don't call me Miss Lance. And that can be taken so many different ways. Because first of all, anytime somebody does like a Miss Lance or something like that, they're doing that from a sense of disrespect. But it also goes back to the fact, too, that this woman was recently married. And that marriage has ended. So this can be taken on multiple levels, that don't call me Miss Lance, that it would be offensive to her on multiple levels. Of course, the idiot at this point is not caring about his own life, the little girl's life, or anything else. He's caring about his own agendas and things like that. Starts firing the gun in an avalanche point.
Yeah.
Which, of course, gets her, and I love that she used the scream. I saw it coming. I knew the scream was going to come into play somehow and cause an avalanche. But it's to me, it's not that you know it's going to come. It's how do we get there? And that moment where she grabs the girl and jumps and grabs the helicopter, it was just, like I said, it felt like a James Bond movie moment. And I ate that up because it didn't feel like there was nothing cheesy about it. It was all step, ba-bam, 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 wow. And whoa. And just, to me, this is something I want to see Birds of Prey, the film.
Oh, God, yeah. That'd be awesome.
Because see this play out, tell me this wouldn't be great to see as a stunt sequence.
This type of sequencing and all that. One of the things I really digged with the helicopter coming in, not only they take one little panel off to the side just to make sure you realize the helicopter is on whisper mode, it's firing rubber bullets, and the guns are silenced. So the same thing that we're talking about with the lunatic shooting off the gun on this ice cliff, they're not going to have that problem with the avalanche in what they're doing and they're using. I thought that was just a great little extra attention to detail kind of deal that the Birds would have, that Oracle would have. Well, not Oracle, even Jacinda would have.
You know what? Yeah, because Oracle, I'm taking it Oracle wasn't involved in this from the way that the story went. Not yet. You know what the funny part is? I didn't catch the rubber bullets until you said that, or even the whisper mode. As you were saying that, I was looking through it. I'm like, oh my God, dude's right. I'm like, oh, how cool is this? Like, added another layer to the whole thing for me. And that goes to show Zinda's experience at this point and what she brings to the table. I love that element of this as well because it's something we've been talking about in Justice League, how we're liking that Justice League is going back to a team of veterans, of heroes that have been around for a while, and heroes that can establish themselves as major contenders in the universe. This is a great example of heroes, again, who, they are veterans. And we're seeing the fact that they have been working together before. We're seeing the advantage of them working together and that they each bring something important to the table. Zinda's more than just a pilot. At this point, she's a Black Hawk, which means her understanding of weaponry and her understanding of coming in combat situations like this would be something that would be an incredible asset in this type of situation. I love this character, and she's another one that's funny how Birds of Prey had made me appreciate the Black Hawk concept even more, where I'm a fan of the Black Hawks now because of Lady Black Hawk. And that's something where I love reading their stories, because we're seeing a version of the Black Hawks right now in that first wave. And that's storytelling, seeing them kind of come in Doc Savage and those type of things. And I'm into them because of this first. And that's how it's funny how I didn't really care much or get the concept until you finally get somebody. It was kind of like Hawkman for me when I finally got into Hawkman, when it was, Gray and Palmiotti and Jeff Johns beforehand and James Robinson who got me into that character, how much I wanted to read the past and how much I wanted to get involved with it. I'm the same with Blackhawks now due to Lady Blackhawk. It just made it all seem so cool. Is there a favorite bird that you have? Is there one, Jim, that you like more than the others?
How do you pick a favorite? I gotta say Oracle is probably, and it's kind of a, I don't know if you want to, it's funny because I say Oracle because I love Oracle, but I'm like, Black Canary is really kicking and wait a minute, how about Misfit? When they bring Misfit back, because Misfit's going to be around, and I'm just like, I keep throwing around names inside my head, and like, it's weird because with any other team, I can easily pick one. Like favorite Titan easily is Robin. If he's not on the team, then it's a Wonder Girl. Boom. Done. No problem. Here, I really, as I sit there and I think I can't, I don't know.
What was that? What was that?
I'm trying to figure this out. It's one of those things where I'll keep going back and forth between, honest, Oracle and Black Canary are the two top of the line, and it's partially because how cool Black Canary. I see how cool the character is here. This is the character who is and should have been a long time running leader of the Justice League. This is a character who has this strength and confidence that makes me go, dang, she's a cool character. I want more of this. But then you got Barbara Gordon, you got Oracle. I really dig that whole aspect of her and who she is, because it's your classic, taking the and I don't even want to say taking lemons and making lemonade, because that even lightens it. It's taking a horrific event, drawing strength from it, and continuing the fight. She never quit. She never stopped the fight, and she just had to change how she was in the game. She couldn't be on the field anymore. She couldn't be a foot soldier, so she's got to hang back. She's got to be the intelligence provider, the strategist, the backup, intel support, that kind of deal. She changed her role, but she's still fighting. And those are the two factors behind both the characters that really make me like them, that they've never quit. They're not lay down and, too much, this is too much for me to handle. They continue on with the fight, and that's something I really like and respect about them as characters and as people.
I love Huntress as well. It's funny. It's almost a trick question when I was asking it, because to me, it really is all of them together. And, really the four that we're mentioning, Oracle, Black Canary, Lady Blackhawk, and Huntress, seeing them together again. And the fact that the four of them together kind of push each other to a new level. They gain confidence from each other because they know each other so well at this point, and they've been through so much together, that they allow themselves to be vulnerable with each other in a way that they never would in any other situation. And I think it's kind of cool to see them kind of brought back at this point, and to see that they needed that. And everybody does. I think that's a very human thing, to need that. And how sometimes when you, in those vulnerable moments, when you reveal yourself, you learn something about yourself that helps you to grow, and then you see yourself in a new light, and then you become something better, something more. You've changed because of it. And we're seeing that human drama unfold with these guys. Because to me, it's not just like we just saw this cool battle sequence. Seeing the two of them kind of sit together and talk about why nobody's giving them credit or anything like that, and how Black Canary's saying, no, I don't want credit for this because, of the whole... And I loved how the two of them are debating over that. Those moments after the big events, where we get to see them have those human moments, to me, are just as important in this book as gunfights and combat and things like that. And I think that's an important balance in a comic series. You've got to give us those moments where we get to know them as people. I want to feel like I can hang with them. Or I want to feel like I can watch them from afar and go, they wouldn't want to talk to me. But
they wouldn't give me the time of day.
That type of thing. But I mean, that's something about them, is that they're characters that you respect because you know them as people. And it's what makes them different from any other female character in comics, from any other male character in comics, whatever. It's the unique nature of who they are as individuals. And that each one of them is something different. Each one of them has their own vulnerabilities. Each one of them is in a different place. I do feel, I'm going to say again, I think Black Canary is the most comfortable at this point with dealing with adversity and growing with it. So she's become kind of the most balanced out of the team, I feel, at this moment. I really like that. Although Oracle, I think, is also in a similar place, because she starts to vocalize things in this to her friends that she wouldn't have done either before. And I like that Huntress is that one that still needs to grow in that way, but yet you see her have that moment too with them, where it was like, we're so glad to be back together. I so needed this. Nobody wants to feel alone, and nobody wants to feel alone in their quests. Nobody wants to feel alone in their goals for their future. They want people who understand why they're doing what they're doing, and how to help them get to maybe the things they don't even realize. Like, I think Huntress is still on that quest of 100% finding out who she is in the world and where she wants to go with her future. And I think when she's with these people, she starts to realize it's helping point me in the direction that I need to go, if that makes sense. Because it feels good. I start to naturally fall into a place that I feel like I'm accomplishing something in the world. I feel like I'm accomplishing something that's a benefit. I feel like I am becoming more because of it. And I think she's still in that place where Dinah and Barbara have been through so much together that they kind of naturally are in that place together. So it's kind of cool. I love that there's like a different hierarchy here.
Yeah, it's you think about it, any great team, isn't made up just of strong members. It's made up of members who strengthen each other by their, working together, by their proximity, by just that support and that camaraderie that you get in a team dynamic and a true team dynamic. You can take 5 individuals, put them on the court, or put them in play anything. If they don't jive as a team, if they don't work together as a team, they will not win. You can take 5 people who aren't as good, but who know how to work together, who work and help and support and all that, and they can beat that superior team because they fight like a team, because they act and move and think like a team. These 3, 4, you're going to throw in Blackhawk as well.
You got to.
They really think like a team. They think like one unit. It's really cool seeing, when Oracle says, hey, we got to bring the band back together. That kind of, those lines always make me go, yeah, I always like seeing that kind of stuff. And you see that in this team. You see that in with them, that it's more than just 4 individuals. It is the Birds of Prey. They are one team.
Dude, even more important, we're on our way, Oracle. Count on us. Inner dialogue. I always do, Dinah. I think there's something really important about that. I think, as fans, you've seen like people longing for DC team books where you've got those characters that as readers you can believe in, that when they're together, they believe in each other because of experience, that they know they can count on each other. And that, we as readers believe that even in the most insurmountable situations, because there's a new adversary that's introduced at the end of this that looks like she's going to be pretty doggone tough for any of them to overcome. Even, but yet we know that as a group, somehow all of them together are going to find a way. And we want to see that. I love when we see, whether it's new villains or old villains or whatever, you see these situations where it's like, how are they going to get out of this now? I remember back with the Savant issue where, Dinah's legs were, basically broken, during she went through like a misery kind of thing going on there. And yet, you got this feeling like this is going to work out somehow. This is all going to be, it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, in the end, all will be well.
Right. And that is something that it comes from the characters and their interactions together. And I love reading a book like this. It just gets me energized. And like these guys have been longing for this moment. The commentary about the Batcave being wheelchair friendly. And here's a great moment where this is a book that thematically is set in Gotham. And I love that this is a great line from Gail Simone. That's always Bruce, always a lot more caring than he lets on. And that's very true of him. My favorite Batman stories are those ones where we see that Bruce Wayne, you don't see it outwardly. You see it in like little side things that, like look what he did here for Barbara, because he cares about her. Would he tell her that he did it for that reason? No. He just did it because he does. He does care. And that's how the people that are loyal to him are loyal to him. Because of those moments. It's funny how just a little caption in this, I'm like, oh, you just gave me a great Batman moment in Birds of Prey. Yeah. And I just, that to me is like, thank you for that. It was like, you didn't need to do it. Because it was a Birds of Prey story, so you could have totally left that out. But because it was set in the Batcave, you took an opportunity to say, let's address this because it's cool. And it is cool.
Yes, it definitely was a neat little moment. And it's part of that thing that I was talking about earlier with these inner dialogues, just giving you some background, giving you some history, but also just, making it such part of a story that it's one of those things that it's never been mentioned and never been addressed before, that we put it out there. And also, it was a great segue into Huntress, because she's talking about how always a lot more caring than he let on. Just like somebody else I won't mention, and right into Huntress. Huntress has that same kind of mojo going on with her, that she's not completely letting, everybody in. She's not completely dropping, the defenses and the walls around her. And I thought that was just a great, nice little flow through into the Huntress stuff, which I got to tell you, I chuckled at this whole, with her multitasking, just completely just taking down some bad guys while she's sitting there, chatting with Oracle. And, it was just a really cool kind of moments where you see how cool of a warrior she is. We got our moments already where we saw Zinda. We saw, Dinah kicking some butt. We get to see Huntress take down, 4 guys without even batting an eye, and she did it basically one-handed.
Here's something else, though, that's going on here that I really loved. Amen to everything you just said. Look at this dialogue. Oracle, shouldn't you be taking the new Bat-Brack for walkies or something? When people say stuff like that, there's that, why is she saying that? Because she's a little jealous because she wants to be back. Huntress is so hoping this call is, let's bring the band back together. She is. That moment was right there. I'm like, oh my gosh, she wants this back in the worst way. And I loved that feeling because you do. As friends, when you split up as a group and you don't have an opportunity to do the things that you used to do that were, where you felt like you had that purpose in that place, and now you're off on your own and kind of in that transition period, and all of a sudden that thing comes back into your life where you're like, this is where I was important. Smallville kind of explored this a lot with Lois recently, when, the Blur and that relationship with the Blur, and how Lois felt like something more because she was doing something to assist him, and how she was making a mark on the world because of that. It's something here, and I always like that. I like that element of it. It's something here that you see with Huntress where it's like, okay, you hold that begging. All that stuff that she's doing with the tongue-in-cheek stuff, that's all to cover the fact that she doesn't want to say, finally, here's the call that I've been waiting for. And I loved that feel throughout this because it's really important to me that these characters want to be back together as much as we want them to. And that there was that reason why. And that was something I think that's a thematic importance of Birds of Prey, is that you see characters that come together like a family. And this is, I think it's something that's a quality of the best DC Universe team books throughout their history, has been that heroes feel like heroes that no matter what the odds are, you see that they want to be together. They may not get along or agree on everything. We talk about the classic Green Arrow and Hawkman kind of, tete-a-tete, the back and forth between the two of them where they needle each other. Huntress and Black Canary have had that throughout the years. Huntress and Oracle have had that throughout the years. Huntress and Zinda. It's something about, she's that, Huntress is the sandpaper of the group at times. But yet, like any sandpaper, you need sandpaper. It's that thing that'll smooth out your wall. You need that abrasive person sometimes there. And she is that person, yet if you use sandpaper enough, it gets smooth. Huntress gets smooth at times. It's kind of cool. So I love Huntress. She's one of those characters that just, I don't know if she's my favorite. I don't know if any one of them is my favorite bird. So I kind of threw you in with a trick question, and you're like, your sound effects were really appropriate because I'm in that same place as far as picking. Which one is my favorite bird? I think it is that each of them brings something different to the table. I love the legend status, too, when they talk about Lady Blackhawk, how she is a legend, but I also love that she's out of time. And a lot of times in Birds of Prey storytelling, for anyone that's never read Birds of Prey, one of the great things about Lady Blackhawk is, yes, she has settled in our time. She's like out of time in the sense that she's been brought in from a different era. And she's settled into our time, but sometimes we'll see her behave in a way that clearly shows that she's still, she's got that classic feel to her, if that makes sense. She is somebody who's from, a different era of the DC Universe who has, adjusted to our time in weaponry because of just she has these intense, cool skills. But I love that she brings that to the table sometimes, and her perspective on things come from that era. And I think the best writing of Lady Blackhawk involves acknowledging that element of her. And Dinah referencing that when she's talking internally is something that I thought was very cool with her as well. It's that sense of respect.
Oh, definitely. And it's something I really kind of like, that's kind of a neat little, moment just to put that in there and to actually take the time just to make sure that she's more than just the pilot. She's more than just the quote unquote driver. She is a part of this team. She's part of this family. And I like seeing the kind of the nod, not only just as a legend, just as part of them was a definite something that was just a nice little moment, nice put in there.
Hank Hall, seeing Hawk here. At this point, I was ready to see this. Trying to see where, how are these characters going to fit into Birds? Why do these characters fit into Birds? I was excited to see them when they were on the cover. I'm like, I thought that was Hawk all along, but I thought it was Dove all along. I should say, not Hawk. I didn't realize that the guy was Hawk. I feel like a dunce for not realizing that. But it's interesting to see where he is at emotionally. This is a guy who came back from the dead, and this is having an effect on him. Because his whole perspective is, I would imagine when you come back from the dead that your perspective is that Life is short. You now have this sense of mortality and the sense that you need to accomplish as much as you can in the short lifespan that you have. So sometimes you're going to start trying too hard, almost self-destructively too hard, and, where you're maybe losing sight of the proper way to achieve a goal in order to try and rush it through. And we're seeing a guy who's being aggressive. He's always been an aggressive character, but we're seeing him be even more aggressive, I think, now, because of what's happened to him. And I love how Dove is, really trying to rein him in, and it's hard for her to do because of where he's at. And he's being very brash with her and things like that. But good.
So you're telling me he's be aggressive, be aggressive. Hey, he's taking on a spirit squad. You got to have a little cheer.
No, you don't.
Hey, they're bringing it, man. I tell you, they're bringing it.
No more sugar for you. Really. It's funny how these two do, though, fit into this. God wants a soldier. Well, that one of the things that I like about the birds they are a squad. And it is something with them that this is a tactical squad. Oracle is really, as a leader and as a tactician, she is brilliant at what she's done. They talk about her being the 911 or the 411 of the DC universe, depending on what the situation is. She is the information network of it, or she's the one to call in an emergency if you need to, because she is going to connect you with the people that you need. So she can be either element of the DC universe. One of the things that I really like about her, though, is the fact that she can organize multiple things and multitask at once and try to really put players in play that need to be. These are people who, yes, they're heavy hitters. And they can bring something unique to the table. And honestly, Hawk is somebody also, if you're the information network of the DC Universe, you're watching over the DC Universe, Hawk's somebody you want to bring in. And you want to try to get a handle on, kind of the way she had to with Huntress in the past. Where getting Huntress on board and really helping her to see the direction that she needs to go in. Huntress grew in her time in the birds. I'm going to be very curious to see Huntress and Hawk together, because I think at times Huntress is going to see elements of herself that she's fond of, but I also think we're going to see how Huntress has grown, and she's not that person that she was in the past. And that she's not the violent, because Huntress was the the violent vigilante who was willing to cross certain lines that always put her at odds with Batman. She grew over that time. We got to see her in JLA and Morrison's run grow. We got to see her in Gale's run with her at Birds of Prey grow. We've seen this character continue to grow. This is the character who's done all those things. She's evolved. She's still not in the same place of Black Canary and Oracle, but her and Hawk together, oh, is that going to be so interesting? Yeah. And that's the great thing is with all the events going on, that's going to develop over time. And these are things that I'm like, ooh, there's so much that I want to see her. Hawk and Lady Blackhawk together. She's somebody. She's got a little chutzpah to her. She's gonna get in there, and she's not afraid to rock and roll either. And of course, Black Canary. But I think she is capable of being more diplomatic in those situations than even Huntress, of course, first and foremost, or Lady Blackhawk. So, because Lady Blackhawk, you rub her the wrong way. She's got a temper on her, and I'm anxious to see some of those moments because I think Hawk is going to do that. And I see Dove being a mediator in a whole bunch of areas in this book.
Well, I tell you, this whole fight sequence for me was just, normally when you got a male superhero fighting a female, there's usually that moment of hesitation that he's going to have. Hawk has none of that with this cheerleader. He drops her, boom. And not only does he drop her, he takes her, he's dangling her over the edge of the bridge. And I was just like going like, wow. And I loved seeing Dove say, let her go, let the girl go, set her down. I mean, on this side of the rail. And it was just a great kind of just going back and forth between the two of them. And his line at the end there where he was like, God wants a soldier, really had me thinking. Because you think about it. He's like the first of the comeback people really to kind of do the, Blues Brothers type thing. I'm on a mission from God, and I wonder where this is going to go. If this is just a, I don't want to say kinder, gentler Hawk, because we're not going to get that, but is he going to look at it that's saying, okay, God brought me back for a reason. He wants my personality to fight. He wants my, way of thinking with this fight. Is he going to, go through and maybe justify even harder activity saying, hey, God wanted me here for a reason. this is what he wanted me to do, like kind of like a God spirit of vengeance type deal? Or are we going to see a growth and or change in Hawk because of this second chance? If he's like, we talked about all the other birds have grown through their association with each other. Are we going to see that type of growth from Hawk? Is he going to recognize that there is something out there, that he does have friends, he does have family, he does have something more than just the here and now?
I really like the creative team's understanding of Gotham and how they set a mood and tone for what Gotham does to its citizens and to the people that come in contact with Gotham. The Sick Cheerleaders gang and his thing about them. The one guy has assault written across his shirt. That's his thing, and hers is suicide over there. Really talking about just what Gotham does to people and how it brings out this sense of loss of worth, this sense of hopelessness. And how it would breed a gang called the Sick Cheerleaders, and how especially in that age group that this would be a rough area to be in when you're in those transition periods of your life, and your role models are really just this horrible atmosphere of a city, and it really does show how a city can breed and bring out the worst in everybody. If you're there, you're kind of your environment is part of what decides who you are. And if you don't have that strong support piece in strong parents or in, it would be very easy in this situation for, even if you have great parents, for the environment to bring you down because they're surrounded by friends who lead them into this. It was kind of, I'm like, wow, I gained a lot out of this little group metaphorically about what Gotham could do to a group of teenagers or young adults in this particular moment. Because of the environment. I thought that was kind of a cool commentary that this is set in Gotham now.
Now, a question for you. Mm-hmm. If Dove wasn't there, if it was just Hawk by himself, do you think he would have dropped her?
Yes. Maybe. It depends on... I
had the same reaction when I was thinking about that.
I want to say no. It all depends. See, I could see it going both ways. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that, yes, he would have dropped her. That's why I immediately I said yes at first, and I'm like, well, hang on, maybe. He's clearly after something. If she gave it to him, would he have dropped her? I don't know. I would say probably not in that situation. It depends on how much it took for him to get the information from her. I'm personally very glad Dove was there. If Dove, it actually, and that to me. It was a great sequence that showed why there needs to be Hawk and Dove, not just Hawk. Because I agree with you that the question mark is on the table, and that to me was a brilliant setup as well, because whatever your exposure to Hawk and Dove is, right now you just got a pretty good indicator that, I don't know. And I'm glad we didn't have to find out.
Because I was thinking, depending on what he was after, what she did, like they were talking about, bank robbery or armed robbery or something like that is what the gang was doing. Mm-hmm. And for that, I could see him just trying to put the fear of God in her. But had she killed somebody, or had they kidnapped some kid or done something that was just hard, more on the harder edge, I could actually see him dropping her.
Are you comfortable saying, though, would you be willing to defend this guy in front of a group of others? He was really here. Would you be willing to say, I'm comfortable saying that Hawk would not have killed her there? No!
There's still the maybe factor in it. Come on. Let's be honest.
Right. But I mean, I think that's very much supposed to be the way it is right now, where you're looking at that and going, I don't know. We need to, keep... His brand of justice and his idea of justice is pretty skewed. And it may be that he definitely wouldn't, but he gives off a presence that you've got to question it. You've got to say, I'm glad she's there because. Now, it's going to be, I'm with you, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes in this series. And that's one of the cool things because we've got some elements in here now that add a whole new mix to this confident group of people that we've seen together. We gotta now all of a sudden this is gonna just completely change the whole playing field, and these two characters add something different to the whole thing. I'm curious to see how that goes because we get to see him now. I'm glad we got to see this moment where it wasn't just the traditional birds that we got to see kind of off away from the big events surrounding them. We get to see this moment in the bar where Hawk and Dove are being recruited.
Yeah.
where Zinda comes in, where we get to see that Hawk's got a lot of inner turmoil in his return. And this is something that I think it's something that I've really enjoyed about The Brightest Day in general. No matter what you're reading in Brightest Day, you get to see people that have major scars over the fact that they've returned. They're aware that they were dead. Their outlook on the world right now is being affected by the fact that they were dead. And there's something a little bit off about each and every one of them. Hawk always had something a little bit off about him. But the event itself and what has happened to them, there's a resonance that's still there. I want to see what it is with Hawk as we go on over time. This is a guy who's got demons, and we're seeing it in this moment, and it was a very powerful moment to build right away. Because you want to hook people in right away to there's a lot with each character that's going to draw you in. And with both Hawk and Dove, we get that hook with them as well. That the sense that, Dove's trying to be there for him, and this does feel like an overwhelming situation for her as well. And the offer of help. The offer that we've got a group here who can be good for you. My boss here knows a lot about you guys. She's connected in ways that it's really only going to be to your benefit. And I could see Dove saying, this is something for me. And for Hawk right now, we could use this. We're a little outside everything else right now. We need to be a part of something. We need to be a part of something that can help move us forward and help with this situation, especially after what she just saw. That was the great part of that establishing with the whole 6 cheerleader squad over there. It established that Dove would have a reason to really want to do this. And that was great about the setup in this whole thing. And when Zinda went in there, why she was so open to listening, even though she was afraid about the fact that somebody would be aware of who they are out of the costume. Because that would be a little creepy. In your world, like who is this lady, who got her connected? Because she wouldn't know of Lady Blackhawk in this type of, she hasn't had the dealings with her. So that would be something that in their world is a big kind of, whoa, what?
Red flag, danger, Will Robinson kind of deal. But it is a very calming, just the way she approaches and just the opening dialogue between them. It was kind of a nice, the way she handled it. There wasn't anything, outwardly aggressive in her behavior. I kind of chuckled when she ordered 2 shots, and Dove's like, I don't drink. She's like, I know.
Never said you did.
Shots.
Never said you did.
Yeah.
That big, dumb, handsome thing, your man, Dawn Granger, that why you won't take your eyes off him? And I'll let, no, God, no, but he is my responsibility. And wait, here's the thing. The God's in bold. It's almost like that was really quick and hard, like strong protesting to something. I liked the feel of that. Like there is something a little hidden back there that we're not, entirely 100% sure of. And that was important to me because I'm like, okay, we've got these little hints because the kiss and everything like that. Between what's going on, is there something to go on with these two? And I'm glad that we're going to get some exploration of that with them. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Now, I like the ethics discussion, basically, that was going on, between Quince and just how he's talking about back in the day type of deals and just how people, the professors and the heroes and all, they have that ethics, that they had that code they lived by. And that was something that kind of rang true on a lot of stuff I deal with, because I deal with a lot of retired police, a lot of retired feds, and it's kind of interesting seeing how they approach a problem as compared to some of the younger people we have who are fresh out of college. And there is a definite difference in how they look at life, how they look at problems, how they deal with a situation that, it always makes me wonder, like, do we have like a different, moral compass going on nowadays than they had back then? You look at life life was a little bit harder for the older generations. A lot of stuff that we have very quick and easy access. You hop online, you can get any information, grab a cell phone, grab, any other various electronic device. You have open communication. Even on just the physical side of stuff, like I just tilled our garden, the other day, and got this automatic rototiller that took, a couple minutes, boom, done. Where in the past you would have to shovel and do all types of physical, heavy all-day labor to get the same reaction and get the same type of deal. So there is an easier way to do stuff now. And does that easier life make things, it's kind of like that anything given, does it truly have any value, or do you have to earn what you get kind of deal? And I was reading that, and I kind of had that same type of vibe going on. I'm like, wow, this is an interesting conversation to hear from Hank, but he really didn't even go there. It was, to me, it seemed like he was more just sitting there drinking his beer, and it wasn't about the conversation, because at the end he's like, hey, let me just let you know, you don't know anything about me. Molly, you don't know anything about me. It's, I don't know anything about you. This is who we are. The strong, do what they want, and the weak pay the tab. And I thought that was just just like a cool insight into who Hank is now.
It's funny, though, how when you're talking about his discussion point about, and you used your rototiller reference and all that, I thought that was interesting, because I do think it's one of the, I think a lot of times people try to say we should shy away from technology, shy away from these extra things because of the fact that we don't work for things anymore. I go the other end and say, I think we should use the elements of the past to work for something. And I thought his message there telling Hawk you need to work for something, yeah, it may come easy to you, but what are you really working towards? And that is the message there. I think if you have technology and easier ways to do things like that, that doesn't mean you should put less effort. That means that you can direct more effort elsewhere now. And I think that is really the lost message a lot of times. It always seems like whenever we talk about these easier things, quote unquote, to do now, that means that we should shy away from those things. And I disagree. I'm going the other route and saying that, no, we should put our efforts elsewhere then, You to do something different. You take that extra time and extra energy that you have now because you can do this easier and put your efforts elsewhere and still put forth the same amount of effort towards life and that's something that Hawk is not in that place yet, where he can see that, or else, again, he's protesting a little bit too much in that the fact that it hit home with him a little bit, and it's somewhere at his core he realizes that what the man was saying does apply to him on a certain level, and he hasn't seen it yet, which I liked as well. There's a lot of different ways to take that and how he's connected with that. And I loved that whole bit because of it. It was a pretty deep discussion where you can pull a lot from it. And it's something where, and it's great comics do this, you can take it as a life message as well. and it does fit, though. I loved your talking about how technology and things that make it easier, it's a very contemporary idea, because a lot of times it really is, should we buy these things? Should we use these gadgets and gizmos and things like that? Yeah, we just need to kind of wake up and realize that, you need to work at life. And it's such a small moment, but I connected with it in a way that I don't know if it was intended or not. And I love that about great comics, is it takes you in a direction that may not have been initially intended, may have been, who knows, but it makes you think beyond the page. And this discussion is a great example of what I love so much about this book and what good writing, great writing, really does for me. And that's where another area where this book kind of blew me away, because I'm like, whew, I thought so much about things that were going on in this book that we got an hour-long discussion already about this book, and we're still going, and there's so much more to discuss, and I can't believe just how cool this was.
Now, the bartender Molly, do you think we're going to see her again, or do you think this is he's done with her now?
I don't know. And that's kind of an interesting thing, because he's had a little fling with her, and this could be to establish that this guy's a ladies' man, and that he had a fling with her, and it just doesn't mean anything. I do think this scenario and this situation is why Zinda was sent in, because Zinda is more comfortable with kind of like the barroom social crowd and that type of thing, so she can kind of reach them on more of in this environment, she can kind of reach them on a level where she looks like she belongs there, which is disarming. You don't want to bring in one of the birds that doesn't look like they fit.
Right.
And you brought in the one that does and would be very comfortable fitting herself into this environment where she looks like the people that Hank is at the bar with, yet. So, I think there was something interesting about that she didn't look odd, where that might have actually, when you've got somebody that's combustible like Hawk, you don't want to set him off in this scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how this all plays out. I don't know with Molly. I could see it going either way. I love the commentary though. The boy's not fancy, is he? Yeah.
It makes me wonder though, because I'm seeing her as a possible reoccurring character.
Maybe.
One, because they gave her a name, so it's not just a random character. Now, granted, it could just be to show that he's just a ladies' man and doing what he does, but when you start getting the characters' names and, there's definite distinctions about her that, and the first thing I noticed, of course, she's got the redhead. So it makes me wonder, is there a possibility someone could mistake her for Barbara Gordon? Maybe she gets killed because of it, or gets kidnapped, or something like that, and some way to even tie more into Hawk, because I'm actually thinking if we see her again, she may be a victim of something, just kind of deal. And it's kind of pessimistic of me, I know, but I don't know. Something tells me we're not done with her.
Well, but here's the funny thing, though, and I can see your point, and I can agree with it. But one of the things I really like about Gail's writing is the fact that take a look at how well established the terrorists were in the beginning. Do you think we're going to see them again? Probably not. There's always the possibility that we might see them again, but probably not. But there was a definite name and establishment of a background of who these characters are. I do feel there's a strong possibility that Molly was being used to establish that this guy's a ladies' man, and we're going to see more Mollies, but it's not going to be Molly. Okay. And you might be, but I'm not disputing you. Your scenario that you painted is a very possible one, because Quince is very well established too, but she does that. And I actually really like the fact that she establishes these background characters as people who are living and thriving versus them just being quick little throwaways, because it makes you wonder, are we going to see them or are we not? And it actually is going to sting more if we find out that Hawk just kind of really was serious and just did blow him off. Because that actually has that other effect as well. So it could work on either level for me. But it is because they're so well established that's why it works. And that to me is like, ugh. So I do see it. I'm not disputing you. It's more of I'm seeing the other scenario too. Pretty strong. I am leaning towards the other scenario a little bit more. And so is whoever just beeped.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm laughing, to myself, thinking like we've only had a couple pages of her, and I'm already creating stories and possible outcomes and stuff like that for her in distant future stories. And it's, as you said, she did go into, and I do get a feeling of, I know who Quince is. I'm like, yeah, Quince is probably a vet. I'm thinking definitely, we're going to get some military stuff maybe out of him. Maybe he and Blackhawk would, become like a friendship type of thing would form there. I'm picturing all these I'm picturing these characters' background, and we may never see them again.
I love that you're sitting here going, I'd love it. Molly and Quince Happy Hour, a 6-issue miniseries.
Hey, I bet you would get some interesting people in that bar.
Oh, I 100% agree. I'd read it.
We could turn this bar into the hangout spot for heroes offline, kind of like, out of the costume, you need to go to a place, you go to the, whatever this bar's name was, which I don't think they even said, and you sit there and you can talk with them. I think that'd be a kind of a cool miniseries, seeing these heroes out of costume and just hanging out, drinking a beer.
I thought this chapter was over. I was wrong. I'm home. And this bit here, it's just a reunion, happens all the time. Don't cry, Dinah. Don't you cry. And to me, it was the dialogue, the internal dialogue, as you talked about earlier, and I so totally agree with you, the internal dialogue wrapped around this wonderful visual of the three of them together and the sense of comfort in the mood and the tone. Look at Huntress in that moment. This is not the same girl that we saw in the previous panels with her. There's a relaxation with her, which you don't get with her. You don't see her let her shoulders down a little bit and just kind of, there's a calm on her face. That's not something you see very often from Huntress. And the whole setup of these three at this moment to me, that was something that was so special. I actually have a poster. It's a Matt Haley poster of the birds in my room. And it has these three characters in them. Because these are characters who are so important to me. And it is something to see them in this moment right here and to see it play out so well with where they have come. So what's the big catastrophizing? Is that even a word? And I love that moment because that's something friends would do. How many times on the show have you and I both thrown out insane words that make no sense? That's what I love about this. That might be a real word, might not be, I don't know. But it got me into thinking like I'm enjoying this moment with them. I feel comfortable right now with them. I feel like I'm hanging with them in that moment. And I think it's why it's my favorite panel. Because I'm looking at them there. I feel like I'm hanging with them again. And I feel like also this is the writer, the artist coming home. The creative team has made this feel like they're coming home. And I think there's something about setting that mood and being able to do that. it's just kind of like, ugh. And I love I like seeing Gotham in the background and just that whole look. I mean, this is really a panel where I looked at this panel and I love the background of the buildings, and you get to see the Zeppelins, I guess, in the background, or like the blimps in the background. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, this looks so darn cool. And again, colors. The color work in this to me is just stunning. I'm a big one. Gotham is all about mood and atmosphere. And you've got to, if you nail Gotham right, it sounds like, well, Gotham's been done so many times. How hard is it to nail Gotham? To me, it's important to nail Gotham because Gotham is living and thriving and it's breathing. And there's something about being in Gotham that if you set fans in Gotham, they want to be there. And this one set me in Gotham. That moment where I see them on the rooftop together, I'm like, oh, this just feels right. And I can't wait to see how they're changing the skyline of Gotham and what these characters are going to bring to the table with their, new base of operations and all that, because I'm giddy that they're going to be based here, know? I'm glad this is a Bat book.
Oh, God, yeah. And I tell you, just talking about that whole opening sequence where that inner dialogue that Dinah had just was one of those, emotional moments where I'm sitting there and, in the past, days gone by, I would have made some stupid, cheesy joke, some, cheesy little sexist joke, but I couldn't really even come up with something like that just because I thought it was so cool. And I really I loved seeing just this human side of her and just this, just opening up, letting out the emotions, just completely dumping them out there. And it was just one of those moments where I'm like, wow, this is cool. And you sit back and you just, after reading that, I just sat there and I just stared at the picture for a good couple minutes and just, kind of like, getting into these characters, feeling these characters again and just knowing who they are. And you talk about the colors. I love how these up-close images are these really bright, boom, popping colors that just really, the bright red hair, her green outfit, the yellow glasses that always kind of looks a little bit chic. You got the, Dinah going. She's got a really cool kind of, it's a casual pose, but it's still a strong pose. And then, as you put it bestly with Huntress, she's got that calmness on her face that we normally don't see from her. I thought this was just a great boom explosion. And then in the background, you have the little bit darker, the little bit dirtier colors, just so it blends in the background. But it didn't lose any of the detail work that they had done with the foreground shots. This for me was just an absolutely wonderful picture.
Don't you smart women ever know anything? I don't have a lot of, hell, I don't have any. And Black Canary here. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And this moment with the inner dialogue with Dinah Lance is something to me that it's so true. And it's very much a guy thing, as well, because I think we often do this. One day, these women will learn to say what they feel without thinking it makes them vulnerable. If I have to beat the living crap out of them to make it happen. And, it's one of the true things about this whole scenario is she's showing here, I've evolved. I've come to a place right now where I understand it doesn't make me weaker. It makes me stronger. And that's the type of thing. We're all afraid to do that because we think it diminishes us. The confidence of being able to wear your heart on your sleeve, being able to do that is something that shows that you truly, I think, are at one with yourself. You're at balance. You've achieved that level. And I love that this is again shows the growth in Barbara. This is a moment where I was ready to, I wish you were here because I would have high-fived you. Yeah. I'm glad too, Huntress. Really glad. Now, about these files. She pulls her back in, and basically this was a moment where Barbara said, Huntress needs me to say this now. Dinah's saying all the right things. Huntress needs me to say this right now. And that's an acknowledgement of, and it'll pull us all together and get us where we need to go. And it was in that moment where they were doing that they, Barbara was like, we see that she has come full circle. At the end of Birds, she was in, a pretty rough place. When the series ended, I'm talking about. Barbara was somebody who went through a transition period. She came back to Gotham in that Search for Oracle miniseries. And we saw her kind of reestablish herself and get herself – she kind of went back to her roots and rebuilt herself again. And now we're seeing an Oracle who is back to being that person that she was for years, where she is the information hotline, the go-to and emergency hotline in the DCU. I feel she's here right now, which is what makes it such the perfect time for this series and for these characters to come back together, because we've got two of them who are very strong at the moment. And they've been through so much and come through it on the other side. And I love that because we've got a lot of people who need that from them right now.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the headliners of this team at the moment. And it was just a powerful moment for me. It was a great acknowledgement for longtime readers because we needed that moment. It was something, I got choked up in this sequence. And I'm not afraid to admit that because it was something where I was like, it's very rare that you hit comic book moments where you're just kind of like, ugh. And the reason why I got so like kind of emotionally involved in this sequence is because these are characters that I care about, and the moment was nailed. It was something, I get these moments sometimes with a great Batman story where we see Bruce let down his guard with Dick Grayson or with Tim Drake, and we get to see him, and Alfred. There's a people who, when we see him have those moments, and even Barbara when we do it, we don't see it as much with Barbara, but we do see him in those moments where he kind of, drops that guard down a little bit and starts to be human. That was why that moment where Barbara acknowledged the wheelchair bit, the fact that he put the ramps down there, that was like, I'm like, ooh, powerful moment, really good emotional moment. We need those, and it's where you make these characters seem human and you care about them because you don't need to see them all the time. It's when you do, they should be of importance, and these were of importance. I mean, so it's cool. It was just a cool moment.
Oh, definitely.
Now, these files that they're finding out about, there's files about all the heroes and all the villains, secret identities, addresses, everything. And going beyond that, names of students. These are people who they're connected with. So now they're not only responsible for themselves and their loved ones, they're responsible for people and families they've come into contact with, whether professionally or personally. I know as a teacher, you start saying that my students, these are kids who throughout the whole year, you become deeply connected to them. You become deeply connected to, their growth. You become deeply connected to when they're having trouble during the day. You are the person, they're the first person that they go to in a sense of trust. A bad recess issue, somebody pushed me down, somebody said something to me that's hurtful. They're coming to you and they want you to make it better. That's the relationship you have with them. So you care about these kids in situations where they're in trouble, and you feel responsible for them when they're in trouble. To tell her that her students could be targeted, I so connected with that because I'm like, oh my, it's hard enough to have to worry about yourself. Now you have to worry about, geez, if these kids, these kids aren't just students. They're individual names, they're individual people with their own individual, just like we're talking about each of these characters in this book. So depending on how many students Huntress has, these are people who she has a face to, and a lot of them on a very deep-rooted level, people that she's worked very hard to make life a little better for, or to even just make a day better for, if that makes sense. Because sometimes it's the struggle when you start as a teacher from the start of the day to the end. It's just taking that one day and making that a better day for that child who maybe doesn't have very many of those good days, trying to find ways to make a day here, a day there, their best days, so they have more of them, if that makes sense. So she's in that place, and now we're threatening those people. And I was like, whoa. And I'm sure, any reader could connect with a variety of the threats in their own personal way. That was something for me, though, where I'm like, whoa. That was a moment. And yeah. I love that about Huntress, that it's been established that this is something that's very important to her. Her secret identity and the fact that she is a teacher. To do that and to maintain this vigilante lifestyle that she has and all that, it's one of the reasons why I really like the character. I think it's something cool about her. Yay.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I tell you, it was... You start thinking about when she started naming all the stuff that they knew, like about with Barbara Gordon, with Jim Gordon, when and where he takes his walks. And it just started going through. And initially, stuff like Gordon, yeah, he is a cop. There's going to be risks in his life. But when he started going with the students and just people like Sin, where Sin's family is, the foster family that Sin lives in, and just taking these non-combatants and saying, I'm going to kill them. I'm going to kill one every hour until you stop me, is just a really one of those kind of like, whoa kind of moments. This isn't, a bad guy threatening. Well, they are, he, she, it, whoever's truly behind this is threatening to, make this information public, but only if they don't play along. So the main threat is they want to throw down with you, and they're going to go through everybody you've ever just met in life and kill them one at a time, every hour until you stop them. And that's just a statement of a wow, kind of, this isn't your traditional, going to blackmail the heroes, going to do this. This is a definitive statement of evil, if you will, that they're really going to do some nasty stuff here unless you stop them.
I'm curious about Penguin's involvement, because I can see that going a lot of ways. I wonder if he's secretly running this. And, this was all to kind of throw off the guard on him. Or if he's just being used as an example. Like, hey, let's take, if we do this with the Penguin here, because she called the birds, this White Canary called the birds. Now, do you think White Canary is working alone, or is White Canary an agent of somebody else?
See, I was initially thinking White Canary is an agent of somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking White Canary was the boss. And because it was funny, it's just throwing around ideas. Whenever I'm dealing with Oracle, the first villain I always think of is Calculator.
Right.
Just because she's had some great battles with Calculator, and I could see him maybe forming his own version of Birds of Prey, an evil version of it. So White Canary is one of his members of his team. Kind of is what I was thinking could possibly be, or there's just a lot of options out there going on. And I thought that was the unknown nature of who White Canary was something that even added to the story.
I agree. I thought that was something that was interesting too. I'm curious. I'm with you. I went to Calculator too. You can't help but go to Calculator on it. I don't know if that's too obvious. Which, honestly, to me, by even the fact that I'm saying that proves that it's being, even if it turns out to be Calculator, there's enough of that doubt because of the way White Canary was established here that it's got me curious, and I'm so happy with however this plays out. I'm cool to watch this whole event. I'm with you that I don't think White Canary is working alone, which to me makes her even more impressive because she's proven that she's very darn tough by herself. What if she's got a team?
She took down Black Canary and Huntress. She got round one.
And Penguin.
Yeah, and Penguin.
Penguin's no slouch. You don't think of Penguin as your acrobatic adversarial person, but he's got gadgets and gizmos and stuff like that. He rarely goes around without defense, which is part of the reason why I was wondering, is Oswald a little more involved in this than we realize? But I don't know. That again, I see the other side of it where Oswald was just being used as an example. I don't know. I'm very, very curious. I like how they thought it was Shiva at first.
Yeah.
The internal dialogue of analyzing that. And the interesting part is, assumes that it's Shiva. If it is Shiva, she's gotten better because Dinah's gone toe-to-toe with Shiva. So I love that that to me is something I like about warriors and martial artists when they're used in comics, is the fact that they can identify fight styles of their opponents.
Yeah.
And this immediate analysis that if it is Shiva, we're in danger because this one's a little bit better. I don't know. I don't think it's Shiva. I think this really is a true new person.
Also, the option, of course, they threw out there, Cassandra Cain. Mm-hmm. She could be in the costume, maybe, kind of, because they talked about in some of the cons, in some of the panels throughout the various cons, that they're going to, whenever they talked about her, they said we're going to go back to basics with her. Does that mean go back to where she was before all this stuff? Does that mean less complications or a whole new identity for her? I don't know. It's who is White Canary is a huge kind of question right now in my head, because I actually started jumping online and looking at various forums and various things like that, and just seeing what different people thought. And there was a couple interesting theories that people were throwing out there.
Did anybody think Sin?
Yeah, there was a lot. There's a huge following saying Sin.
You know what made me think that? Little Bird.
Yeah,
the fact that she knew it was Little Bird. I'm kind of like, oof. I don't know. I'd be very interested to see who it could be.
Now, I was thinking that that village that Dinah rescued Sin from, that mother, mm-hmm. Maybe it's that either that mother or somebody else. It's the person who replaced Sin, is what I was kind of thinking. So it would be a new person, but it would have a connection that way.
I'm very, very curious to see where this story is going. And you said you had another theory, Jim?
Yeah. There was another theory, and I'm not taking credit for this. It was one of the ones online, but I thought it was kind of interesting notation. What if this is a Max Lord attack? What if Max Lord is the person behind this, and this is his way of, kind of either getting rid of, getting justice, vengeance, or whatnot on people? Because, it's a Brightest Day title, and everyone thinks, oh, that's because of Hawk and Dove. Well, what if it's not just because of Hawk and Dove? What if Max Lord is behind this as well? What if he's the big name behind the whole deal?
He's trying so hard to be hidden right now. I don't know. I guess I don't see that. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just don't see that, but I wouldn't be against it if it was. I don't see what his motivation would be, but that could easily be established as well. So I don't know.
It could be taking down Oracle. If he wants to be the main, if he wants to have some type of position in the DCU, he would have to take down Oracle because she's the one who could find it.
When did he establish the White Canary? I guess that's kind of my point in all this.
Who knows?
It seems to be very quick because Max Lord just came back. So I guess if that was really the route that it's going, Gale would explain all that. So I have no problem with it.
Right.
So, I mean, that would be something that would play out. I guess I just don't see it, if that makes sense. Because it just seems to be too quick. I don't know. I actually like Calculator being the leader more than I like that. And I think that even might be too... I don't know. Here's the funny thing is, I'm so happy with how this is playing out that whatever the big bads... I don't have a definite idea on who the big bad is. If it was Max, if it was Calculator, if it's somebody new, or if it's somebody from the past that we're totally shocked by. I do think Sin's an interesting theory on who White Canary is, because a little bird reference. I don't know. I'm just, the whole thing just has me very curious. I'm very open-minded to it. I'm not 100% sold on either of those theories of it being Max or Calculator yet. Out of the two, I give an edge to Calculator.
Oh, yeah, definitely Calculator just because of the past history and all that stuff. But I thought it was kind of fascinating thinking, because I started thinking about all the Brightest Day titles, and it just got in my head, what if Max Lord is associated with every single title, and we just don't realize it yet? And it could be, leading into a nice, conglomeration of the titles and or, just, a massive, whatever that cool word they used before, catastrophe.
Was it catastrophizing or something like that?
Yeah, catastrophizing event. I'm gonna figure out how to say that word, and I'm gonna use it in a sentence.
Well,
that's my goal.
You go ahead and do that, okay?
That's just a neat word.
Are you going to do that on air, or is it just going to be just for your own pleasure, just to kind of sit at home and use it in a sentence and then sit around joyfully about it?
Well, I'm thinking a little bit of both. I think I use it at work, just to see the look on their face, because not much surprises them anymore when I throw out something goofy like this. But I definitely have to use it on air here, somewhere in the show. It'll just come out of nowhere, out of left field, boom, and it'll get dropped. But first I do have to learn how to say it correctly. I've been practicing, and as you can tell by just the way I butchered it, I need more work.
I see you. I have these images of you now running out into your front yard and yelling out the sentence that you come up with for it. And saying, now none can challenge me. And the police coming by to have you carted away. But, I mean, it's just one of those things. I mean, that's how my mind works. But actually, if anyone wants to send in a Where's Whatnot now of Jim doing that, I would love to see it. And I'll put it up on the site, so it'll be great.
Amen.
But, I don't know, it's so funny because I knew this was going to be great because I was so excited for the birds to be back. And when you love a series and when you love characters so well and you know that the creative that's going to do it is going to do it right, you get excited. I had high expectations. I did not expect – I expected to be blown away, and it went to a different level. And I think it was something that's worth noting here, that I just feel that this showed the growth of every member of the creative team in the issue. It felt very special. And I think there's times where, and I thought it was important to note, because to me, it's one thing to say that a book was fantastic and great and just one of your favorite reads, but when you do feel like there's a sense of progression, not just for the characters, but with creative, it's worth noticing. And I want to go back and reread now, again, my Birds of Prey run, just to enjoy the previous issues and see that progression again, because I think that's something that's very cool. That's what I love about following creators, is enjoying their growth, because I think my favorite creators are definitely ones that they're not content with just kind of getting to a certain place in their craft. They like to keep pushing the envelope. and coming up with new ways to do things and coming up with ways to take it farther. And I love that this return to this series feels like it's moved everybody forward on all aspects of the comic. And when you do that, it just shows that that time away has now done something new. And this book to me is a AAA top of the shelf book. I mean, this is what comics are to me. And when you get a great comic like this, I want to. I mean, gosh, the fact that we're getting so many of these type of books now, and to have one that just nails it like this is my favorite read of the month. I'm just like, whoa! I've read this, and this is no exaggeration, 6 times,
Yeah.
and I still am finding new nuances to it, and the artwork is just making me excited. Because I read it 3 or 4 times initially just for my own enjoyment. And then I went through, when I knew you and I were going to chat about it this week, we talked about it earlier in the week, I read it then, and then I read it again today just to kind of have it fresh in my mind before now. And every time, I mean, there was nothing that was diminished. There was something that was added, and there was something new I noticed about the art. This is one of those that was an art pleasure to look through. And I do commend the art team for their growth as well. It was cool. It's an awesome book. And if you're not reading Birds of Prey, you are crazy. There's no other way about it. You're nuts.
No ifs, ands, or buts on that one. Huh? No ifs, ands, or buts. No hesitation on that.
I mean, this is like the to me, this was the best published, and it's like whoa, and that's not knocking anything down. I have so many books that I'm enjoying right now, but this was like whoa, very cool, and I'm so giddy that I can still be surprised by Birds of Prey and what it can do. And that to me has always been a landmark and a testament to that book. Its swan song was like, to me, I was like, well, it was closure for, a great run on Birds. And this to me just like, whoa, that's cool. For voicemails, what I did this time, we've got a backlog of voicemails, and a lot of that was due to conventions recently, and then we were airing segments from the conventions, and I just didn't have a chance to get to airing the voicemails, and I like to get to them in a timely fashion. So what I did was, in order to kind of keep us from developing a further backlog, I went through all of May's, and I've got all of May's on this that have been sent in so far on this episode. And then what I'm going to do is sometime in June, if I don't have a chance to air the previous backlog on the upcoming episodes, in June I'm going to release a voicemail-only show, a kind of a catch-up. I'm going to get to all of the ones, so I apologize to all of you. They're like, where's my voicemail at? I promise you we're going to get to all of them. I value all of those, so keep them coming in. We're going to air them. We're going to get caught up on them. And I apologize for that. I just, this time of the year I kind of got backlogged, and we are going to get caught up, and we value your voicemails. But enjoy these right now, because very cool voicemails, and thank you so much for participating, all of you. I think it's very cool.
Hey, Sean and Jim. This is Comics Freak. That's COMIXFREEK on the forums. And I apologize if you got this Skype message again. I am using Skype for the first time. It's the first time I'm calling your show, and I think I may have inadvertently deleted my message, so I'm going to re-record it. So, just wanted to say thank you so much for your great show, Raging Bullets. I've been listening for about 2 years now, and I listen to it on my commute to work, in the office, and I really enjoy how in-depth you go and how thorough you are at looking at every aspect of the DCU. I meant to call in or email before your 200th show to share some of my feedback about the greatest DC stories, but I got a bit caught up in work, so I hope it isn't too late, but I am going to share some of my thoughts about the greatest DC stories. And first, I have to say that I'm sure you get a lot of people telling you that the greatest stories are things like the Great Darkness Saga, A Lonely Place of Dying, The Dark Knight Returns, and while I agree those are great stories, what I love about the DCU are the smaller characters and groundbreaking and risk-taking moments in the DCU when they really try to push the envelope. And I think DC has had many times in its history when it really pushed the envelope. And some of my all-time favorite series and characters came out in the early 80s, pre-crisis days. Second, it was really hard for me to think of a singular best item, like best story ever, or best character ever, best moment ever. So I'm going to reflect on 4 of my all-time favorite DC characters, series, and storylines. And I think first, but I guess most important, is the Fury of Firestorm. I've always loved this character from when he was introduced in the DC Explosion / DC Implosion in the 70s. But really his series from June 82, issue number 1, through issue number 18, November 83, and annual number 1, November 83, that is just the height of this character. This is a great example of DC taking some time to build the story. This was a 1.5-year long story where all the pieces eventually fell into place and things started to make sense in terms of who Firestorm is in the DCU. And you get the introduction of Multiplex, the 2000 Committee, Firehawk, Cliff Carmichael, who ends up to be a really nasty villain in Fury of Firestorm, who only gets nastier in the Suicide Squad. And I would say recommended reading from this series is issue number 16, September 83, Blackout. In this issue, Ronnie Raymond is trapped inside Firestorm without memory of what happened and how he ended up there. And Martin Stein has to sort of walk him through each step of the day until he finally realizes why it is that he can't remember what's happened. And I just think it's a beautiful issue. I think the next series that really stands out for me from DC that I think doesn't get enough due is the Legion of Superheroes, issue 287 through issue 313. That's 287 May 1982, issue 313 July 1984, and annual number 3 1984. And Keith Giffen made the Legion of Superheroes the book of the early 1980s. I know that the New Teen Titans were hot in the early 80s, but I got to tell you, Giffen's Legion was super cool. He gave us a Legion with a Supergirl who was awesome. He gave us a new Computo. He gave us a new Invisible Kid. He brought Darkseid to the 30th century. He reintroduced a very Fatal Five, and he gave us the origin of Validus. And I would have to say recommended reading from that chunk of the Legion of Superheroes would be Legion of Superheroes issue 305, cover date November 83, Violet Story. We know leading up to this story that there's something not quite right with Shrinking Violet, but in this one issue we learn just how wrong things are with her, and it is just a creepy, well-crafted, very pivotal Legion of Superheroes issue that laid the groundwork for story for a couple of years. And for me, after this issue, the Legion became much more adult. So highly recommend that issue. The next series, I think, is pivotal to the DCU and left a significant mark in the DCU is Infinity Inc. Now, these characters, Jade, Obsidian, Fury, Silver Scarab, Northwind, they premiered in All-Star Squadron number 25, cover date September 83, through issue 27 of All-Star Squadron, November 83, as well as annual number 2 of All-Star Squadron from 83. And then they moved into their own series, issue number 1, cover date March 84. And I would say that 15-part Generation Saga, All-Star Squadron, plus issues 1 through 13 of Infinity Inc. was just incredible. It introduced the All-Star Squadron. It introduced the Infinitors. It gave you a sense of what happened to All-Star Squadron and JSA members. We get to see the super-powered and super-heroic children of the JSA. And it laid the groundwork for some important DCU moments. We get to see the early characterization of Obsidian, and it makes sense later when he goes mad. We get to see Hector Hall become the Sandman, and then later Dr. Fate. Lita Trevor ends up in the Dreaming, and we get to see the early life of Nuklon / Atom Smasher, and then, as we all know, he later kills Extant. And then also, we've got this upcoming JLA JSA crossover featuring Alan Scott, Jade, Obsidian, and the Starhawk. And then in this series, we get to see a reintroduction of some minor but kind of cool and interesting Golden Age villains, such as the Ultra-Humanite, Rose and Thorn, Harlequin, and Solomon Grundy. And Solomon Grundy ended up having a very interesting relationship with Jade, and he was inadvertently responsible for killing Star-Spangled Kid, a very important and pivotal moment in the series, as well as the DCU. And we saw some new villains like Mr. Bones come out of the series. Why Infinity Inc. is not collected in some gorgeous hardbound editions is just beyond me. And I would say recommended reading from this series is issue number 7, cover dated October 1984, titled Past Glories, Future Tears. It's a massive battle between Power Girl and a mad, crazed, drugged Superman, and you really learn how important Superman is to Power Girl in this issue, and it's just a great Power Girl issue. And then last but not least, I would say Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, is a very important series and character in the DCU. Amethyst was not only a groundbreaking series, but an interesting character that continues to have importance in the DCU and should be used more, but is not for some crazy reason. She was briefly shown in Days of Vengeance, but I think Amethyst is noteworthy for the creation of a new lead female character, the use of the sword and sorcery genre in a way that was interesting. And also, it's of note that Amethyst premiered in Legion of Superheroes number 298 as a bonus issue. And eventually we learned that Amethyst in the Gem world have a very important connection to Xerox, the Sorcerer's World, and the home of Mordru and the White Witch. And recommended reading from this series, I would say, from the ongoing series that came out in 85, issue number 15, cover dated February 1986, titled The Hand of Fate. This is a hard-to-find issue sometimes. It's a Crisis on Infinite Earths tie-in. It follows up on Amethyst becoming blind as a result of a battle in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And it reveals some very important backstory as to who Amethyst is and how the Gem World connects to the DCU. So it's worth picking up if you get a chance to read it. So again, those are my thoughts about some pivotal and important series, characters, and moments in the DCU. And thank you so much for taking time to listen to this and to get the feedback of your listeners. Thanks again. Look forward to hearing the next show, and take care.
Actually, thank you so much for taking the time to put together that voicemail, because it's really great, and I really appreciate it. And, you know, it's funny, when you were talking about trying to figure out how to put together your greatest DC Universe stories of all time, I had put together a whole list, and Jim's got his whole list together as well. And I wasn't happy with it. I didn't feel that it thematically put forward my ideas. So we're going to be doing that very soon. It's something we're going to be airing this summer. And it is actually one of the reasons why we've put that on hold is it's kind of fun right now to be airing the listener thoughts on greatest DC Universe stories of all time. But I really wanted to rework that so it was representative of what I felt. And I want to go back through my books and my pull lists and things that I've done from the past and really kind of go through and put together a list that represents what I think are just some awesome stories from the past. And I want to make sure that besides pulling the big, you're right, the ones that are kind of the no-brainers that everyone always talks about, I also want to pull, like you did, just some things that are I guess some of the smaller stories, things that people might have missed. Because you really had an awesome list there of 4 that I think are, I agree with you totally on the Fury of Firestorm. I think that is just a fantastic run. Legion of Superheroes, it's funny. These are books that I've been picking up gradually over time because I've gotten so Legion happy. I didn't read all those. I've started reading that run, actually, because I now have that run. And I couldn't agree with you more as far as how just wonderful it is. Infinity Inc. is actually something real quick I want to mention on. At the replacement panel for Sunday Conversations, it was Dan DiDio and Jim Lee. They were throwing out what books would you like to see collected from DC. And one that was thrown out from the audience was All-Star Squadron. And I've heard that mentioned at multiple cons. And this wasn't a verification that DC is going to be reprinting these. But I thought it was interesting when it was mentioned that Dan DiDio pointed out Infinity Inc. And he threw that in with that, which would make sense because logically those two series were very much companion pieces to each other thematically in what they were doing then. So I'm hoping that that was a hint that DC's been talking about collecting it. It wasn't a verification. He didn't say that. But I did think it was interesting that he was the one that shouted out Infinity Inc. in that moment. Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld. I'm going to be honest on this one. I've read stories with Amethyst. I've never read her complete series, though. And I know Peter Rios from Comic Geek Speaks shouted that series out before. It's one that I'd really like to sit down and read as well. So I'm hoping that's one that'll be collected. If not, it's definitely I'm going to be searching in con bins for that particular series because I've heard nothing but good things. It's just something that I'd really like to read. And that's what I was hoping from this, that people would be calling in with voicemails or sending in emails where we'd be putting that together. So I'm definitely going to be putting together, I'm hoping, an episode where if we don't get caught up in voicemails by mid-June on the show, I'm going to be putting together a voicemail episode where we do kind of a quick catch-up, and I can listen to everybody's voicemails and get some comments on the episode about your voicemails, your thoughts, and things you're throwing over there. Because I really do, I'm with you. I like listener feedback, and this is, to me, it's something that's always been a part of the show, and I value it highly. So thank you very much for taking the time to put together that just great voicemail. That was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Hey, Sean and Jim. This is Jody from Tennessee, and it is the wee hours of Friday morning, but I can't wait to rage just a little bit about the comics I picked up this afternoon. Boys, the birds are back down. As much as I love someone on Wonder Woman and will miss her, I am beyond thrilled to have her back on Birds of Prey. I had the Nez on the pencils, and I thought I was in Geek Heaven all day long. It was not a disappointment. I was, it's like it's never even picked right back up from where they were, and Gail just ran with it. It was gorgeous artwork, great writing, and it had just, to steal a phrase, such a hoorah moment in the middle of the book somewhere. Black Canary is staring down the new bad guy girl, and we're back. And in this city, the night belongs to us. Thank you for making my day. And I have a very small comic budget, so I had to do something to actually get this back on my list. I had to drop Sirens to make room for Birds, and I think I made the right decision until I read Black Catwoman tie-in. And so now I'm spending extra money. Birds of Prey, guys. Birds of Prey is back. And another thing I wanted to talk about is Return of Bruce Wayne, issue 1, which is wonderful, gorgeous work. It's everything I thought it would be and more. Such a simple, limited art style and dialogue, but you get everything that you could want out of a Return of Bruce Wayne story. And the Superman quote at the end would just absolutely fit everything Bruce Wayne is. It was so appropriate. Are you joking? He can survive anywhere, anytime. Surviving is what he does. Guys, that is it for me. I have to go back and reread some more comics. Keep on raging.
Jody, as you can tell from this episode, we totally agree with your love of Birds of Prey #1. That book was just, whoa. I think you're going to be happy you kept Sirens, though. I'm really enjoying Sirens. I think it's picking up. It's one of those series that's cool, too, so I'm glad that you ended up keeping that one around. But definitely Birds of Prey, whoa, just such a great issue. It's one of those things that I really love about this show is just hearing other people's reactions and hearing other people geek out. And it is funny, I've got my budget, and it's fun to hear how people handle their different budgets and how sometimes you got to say, okay, I'm gonna add one more book, but that's it for my budget. That's tough. It's a tough decision. Believe me, my budget. I don't have an unlimited budget. I've got to stop at a certain point myself, and it's very hard for me when I stop a lot of times. I'm taking a look at books from all around comics right now, and there's certain books that I know are great that I want to pick up, and I just can't. So it's always interesting for me to hear when people say, hey, I'm really glad that I made this choice to pick up this particular book because it really added something to my reading library, and thanks for calling in with that. That's very cool.
Hey, Sean and Jim, this is Scott from Simpsonville, South Carolina. I'm actually on my way back to work from the comic store on Wednesday, and when I got back to work, before I went back inside, I flipped through and read Brightest Day Titan Villains for Hire special, and all I've got to say is there's going to be a lot of ticked off people, and I think Sean and you and Jim will be one of them, or two of them, I should say. So I want to know what your comments are as soon as possible on what you think about this book. Unbelievable. Keep up the good work, guys.
It's so tough because it's a character. I loved that series, especially when Gail Simone was writing it and Mike Norton was doing artwork. There was something really special about All New Adam, and I get why they did it. So I'm very disappointed because I loved the character. I'm not furious because I understand why. Okay, we had to choose a character that was a big one, and they weren't really doing anything with the character right now, so I get it. They chose him because they weren't doing anything right now. But that doesn't make it any easier when there's an attachment to the character. So I'm very much, obviously, as you can tell from these comments, of mixed emotions on the whole thing. I liked the issue of Titans Villains for Hire. I didn't like the character choice for the death. But I did like the issue. I like where they're setting this series up. I like the direction of it. I like the characters and what they're doing and their motivations. There's, characters who I definitely wanted to see in a series, and I'm curious to see where this is heading. So they accomplished that goal, but Ryan Choi, come on, please. So that's where I'm at. It's one of those characters that this is going to tick off Ray Palmer fans, but that's who I would have rather seen. Not because I'm not liking Ray right now. It's just my choice out of Adams. I grew attached to Ryan Choi, and I'm sure you know what. And I'm sure the Ray Palmer fans are the other way around. They didn't get attached to Ryan, so I get that. That's fine, and I know they have a plan for Ray Palmer, and they're using him. That's cool. That's fine. I got no problem with that. But that's why I've said previous times in the podcast when there's been other characters that have died and things like that, and people get emotionally charged to it. I totally get it. This is one of those moments where you can see I totally get it. I'm not furious or anything like that, but disappointed at the character choice because he's somebody that I would have liked to have seen go further because I thought the development of him, and that's the beauty of it is if a writer wants to use him again in the future, they can always find a clever way to bring him back. I did like the issue overall. That was just my one minor complaint is that it is, Ryan Choi. May he rest in peace.
Hey, Sean and Jim, it's Micah again. All right, I was listening to the show, still 206, and Sean was going on with this passionate rant about not wanting two Batman. And I agree, I still don't want two Batman. Like, if Bruce is going to come back and be Batman, I want Dick Grayson to be something else. I don't want him to be Nightwing anymore, though, because I feel like no matter what they try to do with Nightwing as a character, he's always going to be, like, Batman's offspring or whatever. I don't think that he'll be able to get at higher tier status because he's unfortunately, like him and Donna Troy and like those legacy characters are going to end up being legacy characters, and unless when Dick becomes Nightwing, he took a step up from being Robin, and when he became Batman, he took a step up again from being Nightwing. It's like a tier system where he raises up the tier, and I'm just not sure if he goes back to being Nightwing that he'll. Like, as a character, yes, he'll have the same respect and all that stuff, but as a name and the comic book fans, it's sort of like a small demotion, where like, even though we know that he has all of the respect and all of the power and all of the skills to be in charge and to be the man, his title is different. It's like if you run the company, right, for a while, and your title is CEO, or your title is president, right, and they come in and give you a different title that's different than the one you had, and maybe it technically is as good as the other one, but it's a different title now. The title you had before you became president. Now, you don't, like, they're not looking at you the same way. That's a terrible analogy. That was really, really awful. I apologize for that. Yeah. And also, I think that's the way you feel about Batman is kind of the way I think Ian was feeling about Kendra, the way I feel. It's that, like, when you're doing this one thing, it diminishes the other character, and it's like, I want to see Kendra. Like, I want Kendra to be back because I thought Kendra was a different person. Like, I feel like Kendra as a person is a legacy, and she needs to be there. She needs to be around because she's different from, like, or at least for a while there, but different from what we had possibly previously seen. And she is her own special character and not involved in all that old golden age chicanery that was going on. She was someone new, and she was fresh, and she was different. And now she's just absolutely gone. Like, she's just gone completely. And this is what happens when you start bringing back characters that used to be dead. Remember, like, I complained about bringing back dead characters a while ago, because inevitably what happens is you bring back an old character, like a newer character that, like, fades away. Like, it's exactly what happens. And so, regardless of what you do, but bringing back Bruce, Dick Grayson is going to be diminished on some level. It's just going to happen. The same way bringing back Ronnie Raymond, there's a good chance that Jason Rush is going to be left, like, on the side. You have Shahir now, Kendra, she doesn't even exist anymore. Like, was it Bart out? Wally West doesn't have a book anymore. Like, he was going to have a backup feature, now that's gone. Kid Flash, I think that book got canceled before it ever started. I'm not positive. I think that's what happened. Because you can really only focus on so many characters at a time. And so, like, whenever they bring in the new Teen Titans, there's going to be a lot of characters that probably go to the wayside. We're probably not as much of some of the smaller characters, maybe like a Miss Bombshell, maybe those guys go away because there's only enough room for so many characters and the spotlight to be shown on so many people. So it all kind of goes together in a way. It's like these are the things that just happen in comic books because there's just not enough readers and not enough to go around to float things. So I agree. I don't want two Batman, but I kind of want Dick Grayson to go in a new direction just so that he can hopefully try to maintain some of the status he had now, like the head honcho, sort of one of the head honchos in the DC universe, and not go back to Nightwing, where no matter how much you say he's the big, it kind of feels like the little brother to Batman on some level, in some way. Yeah, that's all. I hope that made a lick of sense, because I think I rambled for a little while. I'm going to listen to more of the show. Bye.
It actually made a whole bunch of sense, so don't think I don't understand you. And actually, let me clarify this, because it might not be clear from my comments when Ian and I were talking about this. Kendra is a character I adore. Honestly, my introduction into loving the Hawks came from JSA, where Kendra was Hawkgirl. So, I mean, it really was Hawkman and Hawkgirl, Carter and Kendra. And the whole relationship of, was she Shire or was she not? I guess my question mark at the moment is the memory of Kendra really out of Shire? We don't know that yet. We don't know if she's a part of her, if Kendra's really gone, or if this person is somehow the next version of it, if they reincarnated her in that role. I don't know. So, and I'm with you in the sense that she might have been a separate person. Maybe we will see her again. Maybe we won't. I don't know. So I'm not quite sure where I'm at on that comment yet, just because I don't feel we have enough information on what exactly has happened with Shira. I'm hoping that in Brightest Day, we eventually get some real answers on what happened to Kendra. I would love to know that. And if she is separate and all that type of thing, then, I'm with you on that. I'm just happy to see the Hawks together right now. I'm happy to see, because one of the things that I was really loving is that Kendra and Carter seem to have built a relationship and a love for each other. So, what happened there? Is that because she was Shira all along, or what? I don't know. So it's interesting. My caution about this whole, where should Dick Grayson go afterwards? First of all, you and I are 110% in agreement of that. I don't want Dick Grayson to go back and take a back seat. James Robinson's comments about whatever happens for this, Dick Grayson's going to be the leader of the Justice League. I don't care if he's wearing a burlap sack. That to me says that they're stepping him up in a whole new direction. Whether he's Batman, whether he's Nightwing, whether he's Sackboy, whatever you want to call him, that's a step in the right direction of what you're talking about, and a whole new role for him. That was where in Teen Titans, when he came to prominence in New Teen Titans as Nightwing, it was because of his leadership of that group. And they were able to really do something with him. And that's why I made the comment on there that if he's not going to be Batman, I would really like to see a majority of the focus on him in Justice League, and for them to really work with him in that book and be able to do his storytelling there. Whether he's wearing a bat costume or what. I'm with you. I don't want to see two Batmen. My caution about making him a new identity is giving him a new identity has the possibility to diminish him, just in the sense that now we've made him something unidentifiable. I think the Nightwing role, to me, we see Nightwing differently. I think Nightwing outgrew being in Batman's shadow. To me, when I look at Peter Tomasi's run, I didn't look at him as a second-string Batman. I looked at him as his own man. He was developing his own tech, his own way of operating, and operating in a way that Bruce wouldn't. The hang glider using the tops of the roof buildings and things like that. It was something he kind of set up his own little system that relied on his circus acrobats and his background in doing things in a way that Bruce wouldn't. And we've seen how that's played into his role as Batman now. So I don't know. I'm very torn on what his identity should be after all this is done. If he's not Batman, and again, we're all going off the fact that Bruce might be coming back and Bruce is going to be Batman. I don't know that that's the way it's going to play out. I'm not, sure at this moment. You and I are completely in sync, and anybody else is, in that he is an A-lister and he needs to be there. So whatever they do with him, whatever outfit they put him in or whatever, to me the step in the right direction is keeping him the leader of the Justice League, because I'm really liking the direction of that right now. With him in that role, I think he fits there. I think what he brings to the team is great there, and that's a great way to spotlight that character and put him in a different place that's uniquely his own. And to put that team into big multi-year stories, which is what they're going with the direction with that team, and I hope that really sticks and we get to see James Robinson get to bring some of that to fruition. I think that's something the Justice League has needed, and I think we're going to see that, and I'm excited for it.
Hey, this is Daryl from the forum. I just got finished listening to your last episode, and you were talking about Superman and the issues that the sales have not been that great, because I've been checking the sales on the Superman titles, because I've been a little worried on that. And I really think, part of it, because it wasn't that they weren't good stories, because I went back. I didn't buy the Monel stuff because I just had to make a decision because there's so much coming out. You got the Superman books are coming out. You got the Batman stuff coming out. I mean, and there's stuff that I like. All the Batman and Robin, Detective. I mean, you have Supergirl, which is one of my favorites. I'm not, never not going to get that. You have Adventure Comics. You got, and then you got the Green Lantern thing going on, and what was going on with Blackest Night, and I like all those things. You have to make decisions on when you have that. When you want to keep a budget, you have to make a decision on what you're going to get and what you're not going to get. And I think what hurt those books were they were like, if Superman's not in it, and I kind of made that decision too. I'm just gonna not get it and get it later. Get it in trade or try to get back issues later on. When my store is having a sale or a Wild Pig is coming up. I was like, well, I'll get stuff at Wild Pig, and I think that's what happened with the Shield too. Because I said I wanted to get the Shield, but it was just so much stuff coming out, and I'm mad that I didn't support the Shield, which wound up, the book getting canceled. But I'm glad that they're gonna at least keep the characters going in a new team book, the Red Circle, with the Red Circle characters going. But yeah, with Superman, I think that's what kind of happened, and it kind of hurt, the Superman titles, because I hate for Superman to be not. He's such he's such a prominent character that I hate for him not to be, his books not to be selling as well. So, but I think that's just what it comes down to. Like, even with Secret Six, I am loving the arc. Like, I even wanted to start a Facebook page for the Secret Six so that, just to advertise the book, because I really think that it should be selling a lot better than it is. It's such a good book, but the point is getting it into people's hands when so much is going on. You got the Siege, you got the Hulk. There's so many event books that are going on that, the X-Men Second Coming is going on. It's just so much, and stuff gets lost in the shuffle. And the sad part about it is, if they weren't good event books, then, I would say, oh, well, but they have been pretty good. So everything, little books here and there gets, thrown to the wayside. So, but I'm really loving Secret Six. Like Catman, like what Gail Simone has been able to do with those characters, and to show them, to give those villains, like sometimes you find yourself rooting for them, and then in the next issue, she shows just how evil they can be, because they are villains. We keep you get caught up in the book that you forget that they are actually villains. So let me stop babbling. Love the show as usual. Take care. Looking forward to hearing the next episode.
I totally get that. And actually, you and I are totally in sync because, honestly, as I just said before, one of the problems I have in comics is you have to hit a stopping point, and we all hit them in our budgets. I don't get upset or frustrated about them, and it doesn't sound like you are either. It sounds like you're thoroughly enjoying everything you're grabbing, and, you just made choices based on, here's my favorite events that I'm following right now, here's my favorite books that I'm following right now. You're right, I get worried about books like Secret Six, because, not worried so much as I think the book should be read by more people, because it's my favorite book every month, and it's not an event book. It did tie into Blackest Night, and it tied very nicely into Blackest Night, and I loved the use of it there. But, to me, it hasn't been an event book. It's been kind of doing its own thing, and I've really liked that. It's been a nice break away from the events. But, I'm reading Second Coming over at Marvel. I'm reading, obviously all of the DC events because I'm reading them for the show and stuff like that, and I'm thoroughly enjoying all of that. But, that means that there's sacrifices elsewhere. There's more stuff that I could be reading that I'm just not. I don't have the time or the money to read some of the other things that I'd like to read throughout comics. So it's a frustration that we get into as well. It's one of the reasons why I'm constantly saying, geez, I wish comics would branch out and look for other opportunities to bring in revenue. They'd look for other opportunities to reach different kinds of readers. readers that haven't typically touched comics before, because I find it sad that the Superman books that I thought were such a high quality, and maybe if they did those stories, except you can't not do Superman stories when all these events are going on, but maybe if those stories have been occurring when Blackest Night wasn't going on, because really they only added one Superman book to the mix. So it really was just the World of New Krypton. So it wasn't like they were, hitting us with a ton of extra Superman books. But like you said, you sacrificed one because you were picking up the book with Superman in it. So, budget-wise for you, you had already had a Superman budget in there, and that just had to give. So I don't know. That's interesting. It's an interesting comment, and I think that is just a problem. I think that the readership, it's constantly trying to grab the current comic readers. And I think that there is an audience. Not everybody's going to read comics, but I think there's an untapped audience out there. And that's why I always say, geez, it'd be great to see digital and things like that take off, because I think that is a way to touch that audience. And I'd like to see current digital books out there, because, there are ways to get current digital books. And the sad part is, I think there's a revenue that's not being generated by the comic companies because of that. And I'd like to see them do an iTunes model, because we've seen that iTunes did bring in revenue for the music industry, although, downloads have hurt them as well. It's such a hard topic to talk about and try to figure out a good solution for is what is the way to protect comic shop owners, because I don't want to see comic shops hurt. I love comic shops. I think there's a way to do a digital model. I think there's a way to do a trade model. I think there's a way to reach new readers. I think there's a marketing method that needs to be out there, whether it's paper or digital or whatever that you're doing to bring readers into comics. All I know is when I give comics to my kids, and this is, your video game generation down there at school, they're like sponges. They instantly pick that stuff up. I don't think that's exclusive to kids. I think any of my friends who I've given trades to like them, enjoy them, would read more. Not every one of them is ready to go into the comic shop, so there's that avenue of it, but there are ways to reach new readers. And I'd like to see it be less grassroots and more. I'd like to see the companies coming up with some creative ways to reach people who aren't currently comic readers. And I don't know what that answer is. I really don't. And I'm sure they don't either. I'm sure they're scratching their heads just as much as we are, and they're having these discussions, because why wouldn't they? They want to have that revenue. So I don't know what the answer is. Is it digital? I don't know. I'm throwing that out there because I think that digital will help. I also don't think it's the only solution, and I should say that because I've been talking digital a lot on the show lately. I don't think it's the only answer, and I don't think it's a replacement for paper or anything like that. So I hope people don't think that I'm not looking for a replacement, because I want my paper. That to me is, I like that. It's, I need to have that. I love the collectability of it and all that. I love the smell, it's, which is a silly thing to say, but it's darn true. I like, just there's something about, and then pulling out a box and opening it up and seeing all the books, and, there's something mine. I'm a lot like Larfleeze in that sense. But I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there. But, you agree the sales numbers were something that I don't think the sales numbers match the quality of the storytelling. And I do think what you touched on is the reason why. And I hope the creative teams get some acknowledgement of that, and the company realizes that as well, that it wasn't a quality of the story, because I thought the story was top notch. And I hope when you get a chance to read those Mon-El issues, you get to see how cool they were, because they were awesome. So, and I'm not going to spoil any of that for you, but just enjoy them when you do hunt them down and read them, because they were very, very cool. And the same thing with the Shield. Shield's one you're going to want to pick up as well, for reasons we've stated on the show. It's awesome. Great read. And are visually something that's incredibly pleasing.
Hey, Sean and Jim, this is Micah. I was calling in regards to y'all discussion about Brightest Day and all that stuff. A quick comment I wanted to make about an all-female JLA or multi-female JLA is that we actually just went through that, and it didn't work out too well because, it wasn't the team was in flux, and the books just weren't very good at all. But we saw when the team was Dr. Light and Vixen and Black Canary in charge, and the team only had, 5-6 members, so half the team was female. And, it kind of suffered. People really weren't digging the team as much. Now, maybe it'll be different if they're all, more powered, amped up characters, the characters people seem to care about a lot more than they would care about those characters. But, yeah, we definitely just went through a period of time with a super minority field Justice League team that really didn't go over too well with the fan base. The sales held up well, because the sales of that book are going to hold up strong regardless of who you put in that team and who you put in that roster, only because it's the JLA and people are not going to I mean, they're collectors. They're not going to break the run of a book they love like that over a few characters because they've realized that it isn't going to last very long anyways. But that's all. I'll probably call you guys back in a little bit with more in the episode. Later.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if it was because I'm with you in the sense that was it because it was a female team or was it because it was a transition team or was it both? I don't think it was a female team thing. I really do think it was because it was a transition period. I think everybody knew it. It read like it was. It was actually part of the thing that I liked about it was that instead of just dropping us out of the old team, they did give us some transition issues because I'd rather see a bridging between stories than just kind of okay, the story's done now. In a very jarring way, we're going to plop you over here. So I'm glad that they went that route. And I'm with you in the sense that it seemed a little weaker during that time, but yet for me as a fan, I like the continuity of, okay, we got this, and we led us over to here. So I applaud them for doing that. It's just that I'm ready for the big epic team right now. I don't know if it was because they were mainly female characters, though. I don't know if that's fair. And I'm with you, because you even just mentioned just now that you threw in the transition part. And I agree with you that is a major factor in all this, the transition part. We're totally in sync. So it's interesting. I don't know.
Hey, Sean, Jim. This is Rick Roxton from the Book Cave, Rick's Comic, and Popcorn Theater podcast. And I just want to make a comment about the question that Jim had about Matter Eater Lad of the Legion superhero. Matter Eater Lad, his only power is just to eat anything that's in sight that's not food. He's from the planet Bismol. Yeah, I know what you're going to say, Pepto-Bismol, but on that planet, all the food had became poison. So they had to develop the ability to eat everything else, like rocks and steel and everything, anything and everything. So, instead of eating food. Now, you was wondering if he had any other way, if his ability to eat matter converted to any other kind of energy, like super strength. Well, his doesn't. But there is another character from the planet. Her name, I believe they call her Calorie Queen. She could convert the matter into super strength when she ate it. So, which made more sense than this be able to eat robots or stuff like that. You'd think after a while you get a little full. So I guess he has a metabolism that really burn it off real fast because I don't know about you, but I don't think I could eat, like a tunnel like he done a few times now. To get some more idea of Matter Eater Lad, or his real name is Tinsel Kim. He's appeared a few times in the Legion, in solo stories where one time they thought he was a Legion traitor. Come to find out, it was his younger brother who, planted a device that transmitted evil thoughts. And he and his brother had a fight. His brother kind of smacked him and hit him a little too hard, and he felt bad about it. He contacted Saturn Girl, and they would rescue him, and his brother became a substitute for him. Like the Legion needs somebody else that could eat matter. It's something very important. And then later on, in the 5 years later, you have Tinsel Kim, who has retired from the Legion because his planet required everybody to serve in the government for a term or so. I believe he was president maybe or something, some kind of But he comes back, and it's the story is called Tinsel Kim for the Defense. And there's a lot of humor to it, very off the wall. In a way, if you think about it, he belongs more in the Legion of Substitute Heroes than he does in the Legion of Superheroes. But I just want to let you know, Matter Eater Lad, his ability is just to eat matter and, in a way, kind of be useless, but nowhere near as cool as Bouncing Boy, who is the ultimate Legionnaire that we all know. And he ranks up there, but one of my favorites would have to be Timberwolf. He's always been a cool one, but he's been whipped by Lightning Last now, so he's sort of no longer in the coolness like he used to be. But it's, like I said, it's just talking about Matter Eater Lad, and as you can tell, I'm a huge Legion fan. Anytime you need me on to talk about Legion, I'd be more than happy to come on. Thanks a lot, and keep it up. Bye.
Hey, Rick, thanks for the call. And I want to encourage everyone to listen to Rick's Comics or The Book Cave to check out more from Rick. And thanks for the comments on the Legion. It's funny. I've such a vast history with the Legion, but it's very broken. It's like I read a little bit here, I read a lot here, read a little bit here, read a lot here. So it's interesting to hear from people who have been such diehard Legion fans for the entire run. And it really was always, for me, it was funny. We just had a voicemail before talking about budgets. Legion, it was never that I never didn't like the Legion. It was that my budget didn't allow it. And I was fortunate enough growing up that I had friends of mine who were Legion collectors, and when they were collecting, I ended up reading and borrowing their issues, which was the fun thing about trading and reading comics during that time. So when I read them, I adored them. So it's great to hear from somebody talking about how much they love the Legion. It's funny, I actually liked Timberwolf's relationship with her. Actually, that was one of the strengths, I think, of the character. Not that it diminished him in any way. I thought it was interesting, him with everything in his past and everything that made him who he was, trying to find a way to make a relationship work, and how who he was made it hard for that to happen. I found that was something that's interesting with the character as well. But thanks for the clarification about Matter Eater Lad. And actually, Rick's been kind enough to invite me a couple of times on his podcast lately, and I just haven't had the chance. This time of the year for me is nuts, as I've mentioned previously on the podcast, and I definitely want to do something soon on Rick's Comics or the Book Cave. And who knows, Rick, maybe this summer we can get together and do some kind of Legion episode or something like that on Raging Bullets, when things kind of clear out a little bit. I'd love to do something, a segment of some sort on Legion, especially with the new series out. It might be fun to talk about an issue of the new series this summer, so you and I will talk and do that. Joining us for this segment is friend of the show, Kent Hare, and we're going to be discussing his pick for our Rage of the Month, JLA Avengers. Now, Kent, I'm going to ask you this. When you were coming up with the idea for JLA Avengers, what led you to this book? Why JLA Avengers?
Well, first off, let me just tell you again, thank you for allowing me to be on here. Why did I pick JLA Avengers? Well, I think in one of my first emails that I sent to you, I mentioned that I would have loved to do anything Legion of Superheroes related. But I think y'all have done Great Darkness Saga, and I know y'all have done, Eye for an Eye, the first 6 issues of the Baxter series. And there's also, you've got a very good, Legion podcast going with the Legion of Substitute Heroes. So I figured, let's find something non-Legion. Besides, at the time, there really wasn't that much that was worthy Legion-related of doing big Book of the Month. So I thought, what is another something that would be a great Book of the Month that I didn't think that y'all had done? And immediately popping to mind is what is one of my all-time favorite stories, JLA Avengers. I love this. It's something that I'd been waiting on for, with a lot of other people for 20-some-odd years. I was around scouring what little news that there was available back in the pre-internet days of the early 1980s for that abortive project that ultimately fell apart. And I was just tickled to death when this came out, a few years ago. And I just basically wanted to do that.
Now, Jim, you were more, before we had done this podcast, am I right in saying you were more of a Marvel guy when you were reading comics, or am I wrong in saying that?
No. When I first really got into comics, my first run through, I was an X guy. I got all the X books. I got the Wolvie. If it had mutants in it, that was my book. And I also did Captain America. Those were my choices. So, and then when I went to college and I grew up and I got intelligent, that's when I went to DC. No, I'm joking.
I've spent many runs as a fan of the X-Books. I know you're joking too. It was funny.
I like that, though.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. What is our exposure to these two universes, actually, now that we talked about it? You were mainly, aside from Superman, mainly a Marvel guy with the X-Books. Through the podcast, became a DC guy. For me, growing up, my childhood was always a mixture of DC and Marvel. Kid growing up, it was Marvel Team Up with Spider-Man, which was fantastic because you basically got the whole gambit of the Marvel Universe teaming up with Spider-Man. So I got kind of a nice overview. It wasn't until I jumped onto Claremont's X-Men, it was the Illyana. It was the issue where Illyana went back through Belasco's little demon world, and she aged and was pulled out in that one issue. That was my first jump-on point, Chris Claremont, and I was glued to the X-Books. Other than that, though, it was really Spidey beforehand. Avengers sometimes because of the team book aspect of it, but it was really more Spider-Man was my Marvel guy, straight on through with that. As far as on the DC end, it was Batman. I've talked about Batman multiple times on the show. Batman was my guy, and the Justice League. Brave and the Bold, Batman book, things like that, again, for the whole universe thing. My preferential universe was probably a slight edge to DC, but I don't even know if that's fair, because at the time that I was reading them, I was pretty darn satisfied with both sides of the fence. So I don't know if I look back at my childhood if I would consider myself more of a DC or Marvel guy. They were different enough that there was something unique in both experiences. So this is a joy for me to read and to talk about on the show, because my life has been more like this with a balance of between both. Kent, what about you? I know you and I have had conversations about this, but for our listening audience, what has your exposure been?
DC pretty much all the way. I pretty much grew up on DC from circa 1967, 1968, probably initially influenced by the Batman TV show, and what's my all-time favorite from when I was a kid, Aquaman. Now, in that particular incarnation, I haven't been a big reader of Aquaman in the recent years. Some of the, what is considered great these days, I really didn't have a whole lot of use for. But be that as it may, I pretty much, in the 70s, I think I read just about everything DC put out. Now, I did start reading Marvel because there is a Legion connection in Justice League Avengers that we'll talk about. And it'll give me occasion to talk about it. But the long and short of it is, I jumped into Marvel to the extent that I did, basically with the new X-Men. And I was a pretty big X-Men reader down through, I guess it would have been Paul Smith's run, which I think ended sometime around 1983, his run as the artist. I actually met him last year at the Dallas Comic-Con, and he drew a sketch inside my all-time favorite Marvel, or my all-time favorite X-Men comic, the one where on the frontispiece you've got Kitty Pryde turning around and saying, proclaiming, "Professor Xavier is a jerk." And he mentioned that is probably the most memorable image that people bring to him for sketches, but that has little to do with what we're talking about.
That book came to me. Comics used to come wrapped up in this plain brown sleeve. Like, nowadays, I think we would all cringe. I didn't as a kid, though. I never had that. It came in the sleeve. I couldn't wait to tear that thing open. Sometimes they'd come dented or bent or something like that. I didn't care as long as I had my comic. But that particular issue you're talking about, I remember I had a subscription to it. My mom got those subscriptions for me, and they came in. It was literally like a thin, it was like what you get a paper bag for a grocery store. That's what they came wrapped in when you got comics. And you'd slide them out of that and read your comic book.
Most of my X-Men comics have that fold down the middle that inevitably ends up, from either being packaged that way, I think originally, mailed out that way. Then they started sending them flat, but, inevitably they would be folded up to be stuck in your mailbox, so same difference. But anyway, during that period, I did start reading Avengers. I remember during that period, and I was lucky enough to be on during George Perez's first run on the Avengers back in the mid-'70s, and I dipped into Marvel a good bit. When I dropped off my reading, as much as I was reading, Marvel was pretty much the what went first, then DC, and then basically the 1990s for me is a big wasteland where the only thing I was reading was Legion of Superheroes. I got the job and managed to get a little bit of disposable income around 2000s comic, and then y'all basically introduced me to so many things, and
we get blamed
I now
for
get
that.
the box of 30 some odd titles each month to my wife's horror. But it's pretty much DC. I am very weak on the Marvel characters, even that appear in this. Now, I did read the Busiek-Perez run. I picked them up in the Avengers Assemble hardcovers several years ago, mainly because of Perez's name initially. Thoroughly enjoyed those. So, and that basically is the Avengers that appears in this.
I read that monthly when it was out, and that was a great run. This has been fun for me because with the show, I've stepped away from Marvel. I read a lot of Marvel stuff in hardcover and trade, but it really is, I'm reading Marvel because of what we're doing with the podcast when I have extra time. And I have such a backlog of comics already, I'll get to them. This was really a pleasure to kind of go through and delve into these characters again and just how great they are. I got a question for the two of you. I guess just to start it off, did you guys have a favorite JLAer and a favorite Avenger in all of this? Seeing as we got to see both teams spotlighted, and Jim, I'll go to you on this first. Did you have a favorite Justice Leaguer or a favorite Avenger out of this one?
Actually, I think, and this kind of surprised me, because as I said, I did read Cap, and I always liked Cap, and I'm, of course, a Superman guy, but for me, the one that really stood out was Thor. I really liked how they used Thor in this, and there was a couple times like, dang, this is kind of cool. I remember thinking, man, I wish I'd read more about Thor, because he's a character, I know the basics of him, but I never really read the Avengers when he was on the team. I never followed his solo titles, so I didn't know much about him. Just so the way he was portrayed in this, I thought that was a really cool kind of. I like seeing how they used him in here. And on the DC side, I'm actually kind of leaning towards the way Batman played this. I did enjoy the Ollie and Hawkeye bits. Those type of things were kind of some fun stuff. But I think overall, as a character that DC character I really liked, it would have to be Batman. With actually Wonder Woman played a good. She had a couple cool moments that I was like, yeah, that's kind of neat.
What about you, Ken? Did you have a favorite Leaguer and a favorite Avenger that kind of stood out in this?
There are so many. If I had to narrow it down, of course, I was thinking, I really did, like Jim said, like the Hawkeye bits. I mean, throughout this, maybe even more so than Green Arrow, he has and I remember this from his character of old, but the very snide remarks, that just put you on the floor laughing, but including one where he basically first meets the JLA. But to me, I think if I had to name it, it'd be Batman and Captain America, and the great Batman Captain America team up.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm totally dead on with you guys. Actually, Kent, you and I are totally in sync. It's funny, my relationship with Captain America, I remember when Captain America in his own book was not in his, Steve Rogers was not in his outfit. It was U.S. Agents was Captain America. I loved that run of Captain America. I read steadily on through that. I remember the annual was Captain America and Wolverine. There was just that wonderful, iconic cover, the two of them duking it out. He's been one of those characters that I've either been very into or I kind of, grew distance from, depending on the run. And I think I'm so Captain America happy right now in his regular series that to be able to jump back and read this now and to see him here with Batman, when the two of them were facing off in that moment where they were just feeling each other out. They started off slow, testing each other's mettle, getting a little bit more forceful. Then they just stop. And the two of them realized they were being duped during all this. And we'll talk more about it when we get to it. But that powerful moment for me, and then that led to the Batcave bits and things like that, there was something about the interplay between the two of them. And I really do think that the two of them were my favorite from each universe, not independently of each other, but because of how good they were together. Because I could see them being on a Justice League / Avengers team and it being a very interesting book to read. And I loved that. I loved, that whole relationship and interplay. So, I mean, I think they were my favorite two characters. Why don't we go ahead and just jump right into the book right now? I got to be honest with you, being someone, I've been a Marvel reader over the years. I did not know what Polmachus was, so I looked it up. And this is a world from the Marvel Universe. And I loved this world because I'm into Conan, I'm into Warlord. So when I saw this fantasy world right away, I've got to commend the art team on this one because with the fact that this book jumps from worlds like this and cosmic outer space sequences to then street-level gritty storytelling, the amount of detail and the amount of diversity in this one and how well it's all drawn, like this is very sexy fantasy opening this up right here. In this short-lived world, at least for us as readers. This is a world obviously that has a deeper place in Marvel history, but I thought it was great that they took a world that longtime diehard Marvel fans would probably be like geeking out and being saying, "Oh, they went here," and Cord I think is just as much of a quirky world that they pulled out on the DC end. Where it's not every DC fan's going to be aware of Cord, but some of your diehard fans are going to get that they just destroyed a world from each universe to kind of set up this whole thing that there is this being that is going around trying to find the secrets of existence for his own purpose. And he's willing to destroy entire universes in order to achieve that goal. Which it's kind of funny that we all started off our conversation talking about that DVD release that just came out, Crisis on Two Worlds, and talking about the destruction of universes there and destruction of all existence there. And now we go to this where we've got another being who really doesn't value life at all. He values his own need for power and knowledge. And knowledge more so than I think that knowledge and understanding is more important to him than anything else. This is the ultimate in creepiness, because what do you do? And the types of powerful beings he's destroying here, with the crime syndicate just got wiped out. Like they were nothing.
Yeah, this was a really cool opening. Just starting off with destroying universes was a nice way to get your attention, a nice way to say here it is. But I really did like the fact that we did get a good feel of who, because I know absolutely nothing about that Polmachus, but I got a good understanding of what it was and who it was, and it was a nice intro, nice bam, 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 nothing lengthy, nothing thing. It was giving you information on both sides of the fence. And I thought that was just a cool way to start it off.
And Polmachus is a world that glorifies warfare. So,
let me earn my keep as a historian here for a second.
Sure.
Polemachus is it's actually a Greek word that literally means warlord, and Archon, the ruler. Yeah, the basically Archon is also Greek, means ruler or lord. But yeah, it's a very appropriate pair of names for the world and its ruler. And yeah, I remember Archon, from way on back. I remember at least encountering him, and Thundra, wife here. I mainly remember her as when she was trying to latch onto the thing. It seemed like she was kind of like, who is the character that kept coming to Earth and kept trying to get Superman to marry her, breed with her? Who was that? Was that Maxima?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she, at least at one time, that's what I remember of Thundra, that she was coming back and coming to, in the Fantastic Four and trying to latch onto the thing. She must have ultimately found Archon, according to this.
Polemachus, when you were talking about the Greek origins of that,
yeah,
how true is Archon's character, at least thematically, to Greek history?
I don't think there's really much connection other than the appropriateness of the names, because Archon was actually a city official in ancient Athens, and it literally means a ruler or one who holds ruling authority or something like that.
I think it's interesting the fact that Sean and I both butchered that name without even realizing what we were saying, and you just come in and tell us the proper pronunciation without throwing it in our faces, saying, "You idiots, it's Polemachus, not Polmachus."
Oh, believe me, I mispronounce enough. First time I ever taught Greek history, I had one of the professors come and sit in on the class, and all of my exposure, previously to ancient languages, all been Latin. So I was pronouncing all these Greek words as if they were Latin words. And, well, he didn't call me down in class. I had him sit in because I wanted him to write a letter of recommendation for me sometime. But afterwards he said, "You really need to change your pronunciation." So, yeah, it's Greek is kind of quirky in its pronunciation.
Hey, it's all Greek to me, huh?
Oh, God.
Come on, that was just set up so well.
It was obvious, yeah.
Thank you.
I did like the use of Quord here, the Weaponeers of Quord, and bringing in that they were creating this devastating weapon, and that it looked like the crime syndicate was going to try and take the weapon. But amidst all of this, we never get to see where that ultimately was going to go because they're destroyed. I like that in both cases, they were destroyed mid-event, where you got just enough that you were curious to see where it was going to go, and yet it was ripped out from underneath you. And I think that's great storytelling here, because if you're going to build up an intensity, you got to give us enough that we are going to have some connection, albeit briefly, to these particular characters beforehand, and then we get there as a universe. I loved the little setup of these book openings showing us one of the universes.
Yeah.
And cosmic stories to me have been something that I've always been interested in. This is very Starlin in its feel, and I mean that totally as a compliment. I've always loved Starlin's big cosmic stories, and to be able to see this Grandmaster kind of having this first confrontation with Krona, it was a very powerful moment. You talk about how powerful Superman is, how powerful Thor is, how powerful, really, and those are two heavy hitters, I think, in this one, or two showcased as two incredibly powerful heavy hitters. Their power is nothing compared to these two individuals that are on screen right now. Even Grandmaster, who's like this gamesman and all that, his cosmic power, his power levels are more than that of Superman. Did you guys take that way? I totally did.
Oh yeah. Hey, can I jump back just a little bit to the crime syndicate
Absolutely.
pages? Once again, the crime syndicate's world bites it early, as in Crisis on Infinite Earths 1, pages 3 through 9. So it's right off the bat.
So they're the red shirts of the DC universe, basically.
Well, I also think that Busiek, though, is making a nod to Crisis on Infinite Earths here thematically with what they're going on, because this really is the death of universes similar to what. So he and Perez were making a nod to that big event and kind of making this thematically a part of that type of world-changing event. So it fits a DC story as well as a Marvel story. I love that we turn the page, that we right away get our first glimpse at a Marvel character in the DC universe. We're like dropped right into this whole thing. This Terminus character was from the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, and it's funny because when we're first getting into this, I was really excited when I saw this, because with me and crossover stuff, I'm not a big fan of the stories where DC hero fights a Marvel hero and all, because I always figure you're never really going to get a full and accurate representation of what a fight would happen. There's always going to be a little bit of politics playing, like this character can't lose to this character and that kind of stuff, and each side won't be able to willing just to give a full butt kicking. But when I saw that those heroes against the villains, I was like, yeah, this is the kind of stuff I would like to see. I would like to see the Avengers go up against Luthor, or the JLA go up against Doctor Doom, or stuff like that. So when this story was first starting off, these opening pages really had me going, yes, all right, this is going to be something cool.
I think it's a dream as a fan, too, to see some of the heavy-hitting villains of one universe go up against the heroes of the other universe, and actually seeing a true battle.
Yeah.
Because this is totally brand new from the beginning, and it feels epic. I mean, Plastic Man, very similar to the DVD what I was talking about in our last episode together. To be able to talk about how Plastic Man here is comic relief, not only is asking all the questions that we want, but, there's this bit where he's covering up the face of Terminus. Batman's calling out strategy, saying that we need to use that staff of his and get that staff away. And the whole thing was a swerve to make Terminus think that they were trying to take the staff, when that wasn't what they were doing at all, and Plastic Man and all these other heroes were acting as a distraction so that Green Lantern could get into place and basically use Terminus's power against him. How do you defeat a villain that's more powerful than you? You don't. You let them defeat themselves. And that was cool. It was a great strategy. That was the only way, really, to be able to take down Terminus. And that was just a neat moment for me. I like that Plastic Man was in the kite format.
Yeah.
He would be a cool character to be. Plastic Man?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that'd be kind of fun to be Plas, but it's weird. I don't know if I would want to, that kind of stuff. Even like with Reed Richards, I always thought the coolest thing for me about him wasn't the stretching ability, it was his intellect. I liked he was this super scientist. I always thought that was kind of cool. So plastic powers are kind of neat, and I like how Ralph uses it, as elongated man, and how Reed uses it to accentuate his science stuff. So if that was my sole power, is the elasticity, I don't know how. Part of me would think I'd start thinking, man, I'm kind of cheated here. I don't got any of the cool stuff.
Well, he can really, though, turn himself into just about anything.
Yeah.
I mean, he really does. It's funny, in the JLA run that Morrison did, you got to see a Plastic Man. See, I think it's part of he's there for comic relief, but you got to see him be an incredibly useful part of that team. So he is interesting as a character. I'm with you. It's not a power set that I'm like, geez, I want either of those power sets. And I agree with you with Reed Richards. It was more of the gadgets and gizmos to me, because it was always cool. Like, who doesn't want to drive the Fantastic car or stuff like that? I mean, that stuff is really neat to me. I do like Plastic Man and Mr. Fantastic as characters. I like the visuals. I love when artists kind of play around with how they flow in and out of panels and how they can change shapes and work differently with different kinds of villains. I just think that they're cool characters for a visual.
Oh,
and in this case, it just so totally works because I think as an artist, they're fun to play around with. To see
Alan Perez has the fun with Plastic Man in this, believe me.
Yeah, that is something that I do completely agree with you guys on that. This, he does let somebody to flex the muscle and flex the creativity with him. So we do get some really cool Plastic Man moments throughout this. So I'm not going to completely knock. Blech.
You gonna finish that thought, or are you just gonna say black and leave it at that?
Well, let's see. I started knock. I'm like,
and then black. What does that mean exactly?
I meant to say knock, Plastic Man, but I was just throwing out every other word other than that.
You got your point across, though.
Did you see Avatar?
No,
You sound like one of the Na'vi. knock, knock, knock.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Did you notice where Terminus first appeared in the DC universe?
No, where?
Near Fallville, Iowa.
I wonder, is that why you brought up Iowa?
Dude, no, honestly,
Okay.
I literally just threw out that state. You know,
Okay.
I just picked that. It wasn't anything intentional. I have no hatred towards Iowa. I think Iowa's, probably a really cool place. Never personally been there, but I bet you it's a nice place,
I want to say something here. This is something you should learn from, Jim, because you can learn a lot from comics. Notice that the heroes are fighting passionately to save Iowa.
Yeah.
It's the villain that's trying to destroy Iowa.
Well, I do have a goatee,
if you're comfortable with that, that's okay with me. I like this bit where the Spectre comes in, and it's the Hal Jordan Spectre. I loved that this series, when they were doing it, they stayed pretty current to the way comics were back then, both the Justice League and the Avengers, in that the status quos of like having Hal Jordan as the Spectre versus going with the Jim Corrigan one. If you didn't know who Terminus was, this is your first introduction that this being is alien to this plane of existence. It does not belong here. At this time with Hal Jordan, if you weren't reading the Hal Jordan Spectre, heroes, when they weren't with Hal, in most cases were not aware that Hal Jordan was still around. They knew Hal Jordan had died during Final Night. They didn't have this deep memory of him being around as the Spectre. When he appeared as the Spectre, they always had this like puzzled Hal thing, and then they would start to connect with those memories, but they weren't always really clear. Kyle Rayner was, because as Green Lantern, they seemed to have a little bit more of an interaction, but it was an interesting little twist with Hal that the general public was not really aware that this was former Green Lantern was the Spectre.
I really did like that look of shock on the face on a couple of them. Just that just initial reaction. You were talking about how when he first appeared, like, oh, Hal, like that kind of stuff, and a nice little brief explanation type of deal as well, just in case, for the non-DC people who had no idea why they're reacting to this character.
Well, that actually does kind of explain something. When I emailed Sean the various things that I kind of looked at as I was reading through this, and one of the things I listened to was the Comic Geek Speak Footnotes episodes, basically dissecting this panel by panel, every character and everything. It's a wonderful thing for anybody to listen to if you want to get into the nitty-gritty. But they made a statement there which goes along with what Sean just said, that I did not remember, that they were not really aware that Hal was the Spectre. Sean's explanation actually does get across probably what the situation was, that they weren't aware until they saw him, and then those memories start coming back to them.
It was like echoes were there, if that makes sense. Because that was true to his... I read his series as the Spectre, and that was how it worked in his series. Like, the people who were around him all the time obviously were clearly aware of him. But it was other people who were close to him. There was like echoes of the fact, like when he was right in their presence, they would remember previous meetings and things like that. But then it would be he would drift away, and it'd be kind of like echoes of it were still there. Like there was an awareness, but it was subconscious. If I'm making sense at all. It was kind of cool. It had a very supernatural vibe to it and how it worked out.
Never been a big reader of the Spectre. I mainly been exposed to him as he's appeared in various big events or crossed over into like Justice League or something like that.
I wonder, I don't know, I'm assuming you could probably still get that series on the cheap, although I don't know with how popular Hal is now, I don't know how true that is. But I think people are more interested in Hal as Green Lantern than the Spectre. It was J.M. DeMatteis wrote the series, and it's really good. It's well worth seeking out. So if anybody is looking for an interesting series, they're curious to what Hal was like as the Spectre, it's worth picking. I mean, that's a writer who hits a home run pretty much every time. And it's a series that was under a lot of people's radars, and I can't recommend it enough. New York City. We're now in the Marvel Universe, and we see Starro.
Where else would you be in the Marvel Universe?
Yeah, absolutely. But so great to see the Avengers now. Their first battle is with Starro, and this is a brand new creature to them. So now it's the Avengers not only having to deal with fighting civilians, but they're also fighting each other. We've got Wasp fighting her husband, Yellow Jacket, and I kept wanting to call her Miss Marvel at the time.
Yeah.
but it was Warbird here. It was Binary. My first exposure to her was really as Binary in the X-Men. But then she became Warbird, and then now she's Miss Marvel again. I've always liked Carol Danvers as a character. So it was very cool. I was geeking out to see her here and drawn by Perez because he does such a great job with her. Same thing with Quicksilver. A lot of these characters like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, my exposure to them was first through the X-Men as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. To see them as good guys on the Avengers, which I did read them many years as good guys on the Avengers, the rich history with them, to have them with DC characters in this big battle was just a geek out for me.
A couple of things, I had never thought about it, Sean, until the way you phrased that a second ago. How appropriate is this? You've got DC characters fighting another menace, but when you first introduced to the Marvel characters, they're fighting another menace, but they're also fighting each other. How often in early Marvel comics did, the first meeting of various heroes inevitably lead to a big knockdown, drag-out fight before they became friends?
The one creepy thing about Starro, too, when you're talking about that is it's civilians as well. So as heroes, you have to hold back. You have to be careful, but you have to protect yourself at the same time. How do you do that? And pull your punches with loved ones, who are, of course, the heroes in this case, but also civilians who can't take quite as much as a lot of your loved ones can. Like She-Hulk, you can blast her left and right. She's going to be okay. But even Yellow Jacket isn't going to take as much of a hit as She-Hulk can. You got to be very careful with each person. But I love seeing characters like Jack of Hearts and Triathlon, who are lesser known, making appearances here. Because Triathlon was actually created by Busiek, I believe.
Yes, he was. He was created during the Busiek-Perez run. Never really caught on as a very popular character. Jack of Hearts is actually post-Perez. I had to look that one up because they only bought the first 3 of those big Avengers Assemble volumes, the ones that Perez did the art on, but apparently he's introduced in the very next issue after Perez left that run of Avengers.
Jack of Hearts actually originally appeared, though, in 1976.
Right, he was introduced into the Avengers at that point. Yeah.
And Triathlon, it's interesting enough, he's back now as a different character in the Marvel Universe. Yeah, 3D Man, I believe, is what he is now.
3D Man?
Yeah, it's another role it's another role that he's taken on, and don't quote me 100% on that. I know that character is back. He's no longer Triathlon. He's taken on another role now in the Marvel Universe. And Marvel fans, please feel free, anybody who's listening to this, to kind of give us a correction on who Triathlon is now. That's a character who's still around, or has at least had a re-emergence this time around. I think it is kind of popular to take some of these smaller characters who have a history, who have been in big events like this, and come up with a way to... Go ahead, what were you going to say? You're like ready to go.
I'm just wondering, 3D Man, what does he tell his brother to go get the tables? Wrestling joke.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, too.
Well, I was trying to think of something clever to say about, James Cameron and Avatar and so forth, but anyway.
Well, my comment wasn't clever. I'm enjoying it, but I don't think anybody else will. Even wrestling fans are going, "Oh, that was bad." Moving on, I really like this fight. This was, we've seen the JLA, we've seen the Teen Titans even dealt with Starro. We've seen current incarnations of Starro, and I like seeing that the Avengers had their own take on how they dealt with him. It's not, how it's been done in the past. I really liked the usage of the chaos magic that Scarlet Witch had, and that was kind of a cool feedback, the energy back to the thing, and it was just, as far as I know, that was an original way to deal with Starro. So that was a neat kind of thing for me.
Yeah, that hadn't been done before, because we don't have anybody really... We've got Magic over on the DC end, but nobody that does it the way that Scarlet Witch did. And it was funny, this was the beginning of when this era for Scarlet Witch, not just in this series, but in general, was the beginning of her power levels really going to another level, to things that we'll see later in stories like House of M and things like that, where, she could say no more mutants, and, really could change the whole outlook and layout of Marvel. This was one of a number of stories leading up to those events that were showing her with a completely different power level than she'd had previously. She was always an interesting, powerful character because of the chaos magic, but not on this level that we're seeing here. Busiek and Perez did explore this with her during their run in Avengers, and it was kind of cool to see, I get into these characters that I grew up with in the X books, kind of seeing them in the Avengers and things like that. Beast Hank McCoy was a member of the Avengers. I used to follow as a kid those characters into the Avengers, and that was a lot of times my launching point into there, coming at it from the X book standpoint. So it's kind of cool to see these characters. I love seeing Iron Man's armor, because I've read various runs of Iron Man, and the evolution of that armor. Because that makes sense. If you are an inventor, you are not going to have one suit design and stick with it forever. You're going to gradually tweak and modify it over time. Kind of what was cool about Mr. Fantastic. I love characters like that in the Marvel Universe, where they continue to tweak their costumes, continue to tweak their gadgets, continue to tweak the things that they use as a way of using intelligence to stop their enemies. I loved when Iron Man attached something onto his suit or connected his suit to various power sources to give himself a little surge of power or something like that, to be that one thing that he needed to overcome an enemy. But I also love seeing that, it's not just the suit, it's the man inside it. Yeah. Where you see Tony come up with some very unique and creative ideas, some leadership ideas in how to resolve some of these problems here. I love the team dynamics. One of the things that really worked in this whole thing, and this is both for the Justice League and Avengers, we get to see that these iconic teams at their best are ones where you really feel that they may lose battles along the way, but they are ultimately going to keep coming, and somewhere, somehow, because they're together and they've got such a diverse makeup, they are going to band together and find a way to beat just about anything you can throw at them. They can be very street level, where they're fighting traditional villains like the Royal Flush Gang, or very cosmic, where they're, facing Krona. And, characters, it really is Krona and Darkseid and characters like that in this, more so than the Grandmaster, who is less of an enemy to them in this one and more of a gamesman who they just happen to be puppets within this. I love that little twist. It's a cool little story from, a big story, I should say, from that.
Just a couple of things I wanted to say. First off, I love George Perez's Scarlet Witch. Just doesn't get any better than that. But I wanted to say a couple more words about the idea of chaos magic. When did that exactly come in as an idea? Because I don't remember it from way on back. I remember it being part of Busiek and Perez's run, but back in my much earlier exposure to the Scarlet Witch and the Avengers, I don't think they ever referred to that. It was just simply that she cast hexes and just kind of messed things up, for people.
I think what it was it was an eventual explanation of the hexes that she cast. Because you're right, back in her original run in the X-Men, when she was introduced as part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, it was the hexes that she cast. But if you look at the behavior, pretty consistent is that they caused chaotic behavior in the person. And they tended to shift things in a way that was not to the benefit of that person. So I think it just evolved over the time as they made her more and more powerful. It just evolved into that it was a pure form of chaos that it was caused, and it would just... Yeah. I think it was when they were trying to give her more powers. Yeah. Not trying to give her more powers, but to try to explain the nature of what she was doing. Because I think, one of the things about mutants in the X world has been that over time, we've gotten this concept of alpha mutants. And there were these mutants that were just they had gone to the next level. They had evolved. Magneto was an alpha mutant, in the sense that he was just a little bit more powerful than everybody else. His powers had peaked. It'd been like the peak of evolution. That's kind of the cool thing about mutants, is because their whole MO is evolution, these characters are able to gradually evolve, a lot of them, over time. Part of the tricky bit with Scarlet Witch is what you run into a lot of times with a number of comic characters is her story has been changed and modified over time, where the explanation of what is actually going on with her has changed. Because part of it was that it was magic, part of it was that it was a mutant power. And depending on who was writing her, would say whether or not she was tapping into a magic source, or if it was coming from her, or if it was So I mean, it's not very cut and dry What is
was
that?
asking, yeah, and which leads up to kind of what I was leading up to with my question. One of the things that I had read over the past few years was the Avengers. Yeah, and I basically started, ironically enough, with Avengers Disassembled, and there was a line of Doctor Stranges in there. That just, I remember to this day, basically him proclaiming that there is no such thing as chaos magic. Y'all remember that?
Oh, yeah. Well, and here's the thing, though. If you go back and read all that, because I've read a lot, I read this run, and this is very consistent with what was going on with Busiek and Perez when they were writing and drawing, obviously, the Avengers during their run. This is where Scarlet Witch was during that time. If you take a look at the way it all flowed, it's not so much that anything that has happened with her really contradicts what's come before. All it does is contradict her understanding of what's going on with her, or the outside source's understanding of what's going on with her. So that's the nice part when you talk about that Doctor Strange bit. If you take a look at the way the rest of that, and I don't know how much we really want to go into that. For anybody that's read those stories, though, if you've read all the way through, I think you can kind of agree that these writers have evolved her over time. And on paper, if you read, just those isolated little things, it looks like they're contradicting each other, but it really isn't. They've given explanations as to how everything that happened with her came beforehand. And I guarantee you that if somebody finds a way or a reason that she's got to have chaos magic again, it'll magically exist.
Oh, yeah.
There are several bits in this story, which came out like 2003, that have been, to a degree, to the extent that's possible, and of course it always happens in comic books, a little bit negated by later storytelling, not to the detriment of the story, obviously, but, we'll get into the whole nature of the Speed Force in just a little bit, which my understanding is, we'll get to that.
One of the things that I really appreciated, when you were talking about Scarlet Witch before, I was taking a look at the drawing of her. The fine details of her hair.
Oh, yeah.
The way it flows over her mask and stuff like that. But then you take a look right next to her, you've got Warbird. And you get to see, I love that the characters have different hairstyles. They have different facial structures. Like, you could shave these characters' heads and be able to tell that they're two distinctly different characters. And I mean that as a compliment. When you take a look at the face of Scarlet Witch versus the face... I know you're looking at me like I'm nuts for saying that. But I'm saying there's very few artists that you can pin down and say, hair, face, they aren't using anything over again. He's got a distinctive style for every fine little detail versus things that would be carried over from one person to the other. I think that's something that's it's a testament to a true master, and I don't think that's. I think if you look back at his earlier work straight on through to now, you see an evolution of a master where it never has stopped for George Perez. He just keeps getting better and better, and I think that's half the fun of being an artist is the growth. And look at the amount of details in the background that he does here, and on the individual characters' masks and armor. And there's nothing that's flat. Everything seems to pop off of the page.
Oh, yeah. That was, something I think I mentioned one time when we had a previous conversation, Sean. I was pretty much there, when he was doing the Avengers nigh on 40 years ago, really. I mean, we're talking early to mid-'70s. His art then was great. It is a master now. I mean, he has matured as an artist to such an infinite degree. Just what you're talking about, the distinctiveness of the faces, everything. Too bad he can't do a lot more, but,
I think you know what it is. I think it's interesting to see where he's at this stage in his career, because I really enjoy it. I think it's all about the detail for him, and he wants that fine detail. I think artists can go one way or the other. Some artists find a balanced, simplified style that they use to stay on that monthly schedule. Whereas for him, it really is a matter of when he's done, he wants all these fine details in there. I think it's why he works really well on special projects like this.
Yeah.
In hardcovers and things like that now. And I've got nothing against that. I actually like that, there's artists that you use for a certain type of project. There's artists you use for a monthly book. I think that it's a testament to both styles. I think that there is something to be said for an artist who knows themselves well enough to say, okay, here's how I can publish every month a great-looking book that I can get done on time, and monthly. I think that's something where, I think you find yourself in that pace. I think he's at a stage in his career where it's not about doing a monthly book anymore. It's about doing projects that he enjoys. I think he's been there, done that. He's paid his dues, kind of, if that makes a whole lot of sense. And he's at this point. And he seems to be having fun doing this. And we as the reader benefit from that. And I think that monthly artists who are currently doing that right now, are doing, the monthly books right now, they're in the place that he used to be in. Where they're enjoying the monthly grind, and they're delivering us that monthly book with the pop and flair. I think it's nice to see this, because this does give this a special feel, because it's something different that I don't think a monthly artist has the time to do as many panels the way George Perez is in this, because they can't get away with it. And that's not a knock on them. I think I respect a monthly artist with how they have to make sacrifices, and I think that is a style choice in how to make those sacrifices and still make it work. In this one, I think he had the luxury of not, because this project just kind of worked around when he got it done.
I just flipped back to the front to see the credits. This is pure George Perez. He apparently inked himself on this. It just says George Perez, artist. No penciler, no inker, just artist.
We do get to this bit here where we get to see Scarlet Witch and the Vision. Their relationship is so interesting, because Vision has elements of the original Human Torch, and that was when my introduction to the Vision was that he was the original Human Torch robot from the Invaders that had evolved into this. Then, over the years, his story evolved where the clearer explanation was he was made by Ultron, but he had the personality imprint of Wonder Man. And then as time went on, there was a clarification that he had elements of the original Human Torch, but it was a clone of that robot to a certain extent. There was 2 clones of that robot made. One that went on because they brought back the original Human Torch robot. So I loved how over time this character's had this evolution. He was married to the Scarlet Witch at one point, way prior to this. He was destroyed, came back without his personality. By this stage, if I remember correctly, we were starting to see his personality come back, his emotion come back. I caution myself to say that he's like Red Tornado, because I love Red Tornado. I love the Vision, and I would never in a million years say that the two of them are cookie cutter, other than the fact that they're robots who gained emotion. There was something different and unique about the two of them and their exploration. Go ahead, Jim.
The way I always figure, look at the differences, I see Red Tornado more as a human soul inside the robotic body, while the Vision is the robot that, begins to develop human traits. So maybe he grows his own soul. That's how I've always kind of seen it. Like
kind of like Data from Star Trek.
Kind of like Data. Definitely like Data. I see
before Data existed.
Right. So, and it's thinking like with Justice Society with Mr. Terrific's powers. My guess is Vision wouldn't be able to see Mr. Terrific, because I think he's too much robot, not enough human. While Red Tornado is able to see him, which is always an interesting thing, because what is that unique flair that gives him the ability to see that?
Or would he be able to see Mr. Terrific and it would shock Mr. Terrific? I don't know.
I thought wasn't there I'm pretty sure there was some interaction with JLA, JSA, where Red Tornado was able to see Mr. Terrific. And
I'm talking about Vision.
Oh.
Would Vision be able to see Mr. Terrific and it would shock Mr. Terrific?
Yeah, that would be...
I was talking Vision, not Red Tornado. Okay. Yes, they have had interactions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in the case, would we find out something new about... I'd love to see that encounter.
Yeah.
Just that geeky moment of knowing, would Vision see him or not? That's kind of the cool stuff. That's what worked so well in this crossover was you got to see some geeky, cool moments, ones that you wanted to know, and they put together ones that I didn't know I cared about, that they made me care about. I thought it was a really good use, because there were ones, obviously, that they were invested in that I thought were interesting. Thor, I totally agree with you, was an MVP in this series.
Yeah.
Because this moment where the star was coming off his face, that was most strange. I felt a blast of sheer madness, followed by pain and rage and incomprehension. And then, be it over, Iron Man? Over? Yes, Thor, I think it is. It's just that moment, the whole Thor dialogue, just how matter-of-factly he's talking about the fact that he had this starfish on his face controlling him. Like, I don't think anybody else would react the way that Thor just did there. That, to me, was powerful. I would be freaking out afterwards. Yeah. Because he's got that same slime that we see over Quicksilver's face and things like that. You know, he's got the same horrified look. All of them have this disgusted reaction except for Thor. You know, we see Yellow Jacket. I may never look at calamari the same way again. And, you know, Hank, calamari is squid. Oh, who cares? Give me a gallon of Listerine and a bucket of breath mints. That taste. The personalities of the characters were spot on. I've read various versions of She-Hulk, you know, by Peter David, John Byrne's run, to when she was in Fantastic Four. That was a fantastic run with her taking the role of the Thing. When the Thing
You're talking John Byrne's run back in the 80s? One of the runs of comics that I kept when I had the Great Comics sell-off in 1990.
And it is one of those runs where you can have been a reader of that run and pick this book up and not have touched any of the Marvel or DC work in years. And this is that She-Hulk. Even if you feel like there's a sense of time passing or progression or whatever, you still feel like this is the same person. That's a testament to the writing in this as well, because there wasn't a character that I felt like was, except for two, and it was storytelling reasons why they were not acting the way they were supposed to. So I should caution myself on that. Aside from two characters in this book, there was really nobody who I felt was out of character.
I'll be curious to know which ones.
I know which ones. I'll tell you right now. Superman and Captain America, but that was because they were being affected by the worlds, and I think to a certain extent the Grandmaster was using them like puppets to kind of manipulate them.
Yeah, I wasn't really considering that since that. Yeah, I mean, they basically stand for the DC and Marvel universes. Mm-hmm. And what, you know, is even expressed, but we'll get to it way at the end of it, but basically is expressed by one character as kind of summing up how incompatible these two worlds really are.
Well, what I liked about it, though, is everything that I was saying about how they felt inconsistent was reflected by the reaction of their teammates to them when they would say things that were way out of character. Like Superman was admonished maybe not even admonished, was just called out multiple times by Justice League members on his behavior, either from them talking to each other or them blatantly saying to him, don't you think you're being a little harsh?
Yeah.
That was the thing with Superman. My first read-through on this, I was getting angry, you know, because of just the way he was being portrayed. You know, there's multiple times I'm like, that's not Superman. That's not, and I was getting mad. I was like, what the heck is? And it does get explained in the end, so it calmed me down. But as I was reading it, you put it best. Just the reaction by the people who know him.
It works.
No, that's not right. And that was the only thing that really kept me from I was getting angry, but I wasn't like, I never once said, oh, this is a bad story, because of the reaction everyone around it. I was kind of figuring there would be some explanation, but it was one of those things where it was really clever writing. I always say, if a story can invoke true, honest emotion, whether it's rage, joy, or just a true, honest reaction, that's a sign of good writing. And this one really brought out some anger in me, and it was, it's purely from the story, and it was wonderful.
When you read it through again, it sounds like you and I had very similar experiences on our first read-through of this, because my first read-through was quite a while before yours. But I remember adamantly, I was like, what is... And I was just as angry at Captain America. But once you get the reveal, and then you reread it again, don't you read them totally differently?
Oh, yeah.
Like, they had no control over... They were being emotionally pushed in those directions in order to make the game go on, right? Isn't that how you read it?
Yeah, they were definitely, the Puppet Master analogy is wonderful, because that was a real just manipulation of who he was and what it was, but it was also just a playing off of the insecurities that they both have. And it was, part of the thing with this whole universes crossing and colliding and all the funky stuff, these, insecurities, these little, fears that just are at the back of their mind that usually won't come up, were evoked and just enunciated within them. So that's why we're getting these reactions that we normally do not get from them. So it was definitely second read-through, reread everything a lot differently and definitely enjoyed the story more. That first time I was reading through, I was getting angry.
That's interesting because I read this as these issues came out several years ago. Several years ago, and I didn't quite have the same reaction. I remember thinking it was so cool how they were expressing through those two characters the different natures of the two universes. Yeah, I never even really thought about it being, their reactions being a product of outside manipulation. I just thought it was kind of like Superman's reaction to the fundamental difference that he couldn't even explain of how different the Marvel universe was, and vice versa, Captain America, because to use that term iconic, I think really those two are in many ways the iconic characters of those two universes.
I think what was bothering me about Superman was, my view is that Superman typically, rather than being disrespectful and like bringing them down, he would instead encourage and applaud them for putting up a fight and encourage them to keep doing that in a dark world. And I think that he was being manipulated because of a lot of who he is and his emotions by the games master to be this person to encourage warfare. Because it wasn't like Captain America and Batman pulled themselves off the playing field. Instead of going in there and making everyone aware of what was going on, the two of them realized because they talked specifically, Captain America and Batman, about the fact that they were being manipulated. And they pulled themselves off the playing field specifically for the purpose of finding out what was going on, so without the people pulling the strings necessarily being aware of what they were doing. And the games master, the reason why he doesn't bother pursuing what they're doing is the thrill of the game. Them taking themselves off the table has added to his game. And that, for him, is what he's always questing for. I ate that up. I thought that was great writing. So I guess what I'm saying, Kent, I was angry about it. I was disappointed and angry in Superman's behavior, yet I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think you're probably right that there was an element. It just had never occurred to me. I had kind of assumed that the simple explanation that the two characters were used to express what sometimes is the fans' distaste for the respective universes. The hardcore DC versus hardcore Marvel, and yes, there are those out there.
Here's an example. I'm just going to go to this real quick, and then we'll jump back. But, all right, intruders, your invasion stops here. Your own world may be a sorry, disgraceful shambles, but you're not going to bring your madness to ours as well. Now, okay, the Marvel Universe, even Superman isn't going to go there. And this guy has been to Warworld. There's no way he's going to look at the Marvel Universe without being manipulated and pushed. He may have criticisms, and I agree with that. But I think that Superman's criticisms are being pushed to an excessive level where he is saying things that is making the leaguers around him be taken aback. Where they're like, whoa. I kind of agree with you that the place could use a little mopping up, but come on, dude.
It's a fixer-upper. It's not a dump.
Yeah, I mean, those are the kind of things where I totally think that Superman would have some criticisms, but not to that level. And yet, it totally fits the story. I'm not knocking any of this. I think it's brilliant. I love that it's because they're being slightly manipulated. They're taking things that are at the core, but yet then pushing them, influencing emotion that's already there, pushing it to a new level. It's almost like they got a ring on. What we know from an emotional spectrum now, it's like this is a manipulation of their personal emotional spectrum. Going back a little bit to this Avengers Mansion meeting, I think this might be the bit, Kent, that you're talking about where we got Lobo, Dave Cockrum.
Like I said earlier, I said ideally I would have liked to have picked out something Legion related. Well, here's where I get my Legion. In this panel here with Lobo whooping up on the Imperial Shi'ar Guard is just full of irony. Okay, if you go through and identify all the characters, of course, the Imperial Guard is basically nothing but, well, I won't say nothing, but they are basically a bunch of Legion of Superheroes analogs. You can go through and find for virtually everyone a direct correspondence. Oracle, Saturn Girl, got one hand on Titan's throat, who is Colossal Boy, while he's got another one on Fang, who is Timberwolf.
my love for this comes from, again, my childhood with the X-Men. When I jumped on the X-Men, I liked it so much. I was lucky enough that when I had jumped on it, a comic shop fairly recently had opened up in our area, Comics and Collectibles. It was up at Shoregate Shopping Center. And what was fortunate about it is I was able to go back and gradually get all of the Claremont issues from Giant Size X-Men #1 on. Dave Cockrum was doing the artwork on those early issues. Nightcrawler and a lot of those designs. Nightcrawler was originally designed to be a Legion character.
Exactly. That's kind of what I was talking about, with irony. Lobo, for instance, he's been called a DC ripoff of Wolverine, okay? But think about Wolverine's iconic design and the fact that it was by Dave Cockrum. When Wolverine had previously appeared, he had always been in costume. He was created by Len Wein and John Romita for an issue of The Incredible Hulk, I think just as kind of a drop-in one-issue character or something like that. But then when he's introduced into the X-Men, they take him out of costume. Dave Cockrum, of course, had just moved over to Marvel from DC after the run on the Legion of Superheroes that basically brought him to prominence. Then he moves to Marvel. He's tapped to draw the revamped all-new Uncanny X-Men and lays the groundwork for that phenomena. Well, in the process, he uses a bunch of designs, Nightcrawler included, that he had designed for the Legion. Now, this was a bit of Cockrum getting back at DC because there was a bit of a bad blood involved in his departure. The story goes is basically that in Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes #200, there's this huge double-page spread of the wedding of Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel. Okay? And he had gone to the editor and said, okay, I understand that DC's policy is that, all of this art is yours, that the artists, and this is way back in the early 70s, of course, and none of the art, goes to the artist. I would like to have my original art for this piece alone. And that editor had agreed, had basically made a verbal agreement with him that he could have that art. And apparently then Carmine Infantino walks into the office and sees the art laying there. And the art editor said, yeah, I said Cockrum could have that art back. And Infantino basically shut that down. He says, no, we do not give art back to artists. Cockrum basically at that point said, look, we had an agreement. If you can't live up to it, I'm gone. He went to Marvel. He takes the design for Timberwolf, who he had just introduced into the Legion. And if you look at the two characters, he's basically Logan in many ways. He takes Nightcrawler, puts him in. And then when you look at this particular panel, notice whom Lobo has one hand around his throat, the Fang character, Timberwolf. This is just full of irony.
That Shi'ar stuff was some of my favorite X-Men stuff, too. Because they had the Starjammers with Corsair. It was funny how a lot of those concepts and ideas worked in the Marvel Universe in a different way.
Yeah.
Thematically, you're right, there's connections there, but and there's an irony to the character designs, but they did evolve into something different. And unique.
Yeah.
And that's a testament, too, to the creators in the sense that you can still give those nods. And yet there's still something unique. I loved that Lilandra and Charles Xavier. And I didn't know when I read those, though, I wasn't reading Legion. So when I went back and started reading Legion, I'm like, oh my gosh. I read the Legion as a kid, borrowing it. So actually, I take it back. I did read issues of Legion beforehand, but the character designs were something that I didn't connect until years later when I was actually reading the Baxter run of Legion and stuff like that, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Some of these characters remind me of the ones from Shi'ar. And you put them next to each other, it's like, oh my gosh.
Well, me, on the other hand, I was already, like I said, I'd picked up, started basically with, it was actually X-Men, all new, all different X-Men #95 was the first I actually picked up. I was lucky enough at the time that the newsstands, I managed to find #94 and Giant Size X-Men #1, already several months old, somewhat yellowed on the stand. and bought it, then. But I had previously already been a Legion reader. I've been a Legion reader since 1967. And I have virtually all of those issues still. That's something that was not sold off, by the way. I remember getting that X-Men issue number 107, where they introduced the Imperial Guard in by subscription. I remember opening that up and opening it up to the page, and basically my jaw hitting the floor as I see basically the Legion of Superheroes staring me in the face, or staring the X-Men in the face, so to speak.
Yeah,
that'd have been very cool, because to be reading both at the time and to be exposed to that way. Let me ask you this, Ed. I mean, this is a geeky little Legion tangent. I'll make it very fast. You were reading since the 60s, late 60s, the Legion. Did you ever vote for who was going to lead the Legion?
I never did. Never did participate in that.
I thought that was. I always thought that was something that was. Did you enjoy, as a fan following it, though, the mystery of who was going to be it, who the fans voted for?
Oh, yeah, I thought it was a cool idea. I did send in occasional letters, and actually I have this, the honor, of my name appearing right below Dan Jurgens in one of the letter columns.
Oh, neat.
We had both commented on the same Dave Cockrum. I think it was also in Legion of in Superboy and the Legion number 200, that wedding issue of Bouncing Boy and Duo Damsel. But he drew Spock into the background, and we had both written a letter basically, pointing out, well, yeah, we see Spock there, kind of thing. So me and Jan Jurgens, 6 degrees of separation here, kind of thing. We've only got 1 degree, Legion, Superboy and the Legion number 200, the letter actually appeared in number 202.
After the bits with Quasar and the Avengers trying to figure out what's going on, we get to see Wally as the Flash, and this was an area I was reading the Flash heavily during this time. One of the things I loved about Wally was the vulnerability of him using the Speed Force. Because even though we had crossed over to that era where the Flash had the connection with the Speed Force, there was still that element of, I don't know everything about it yet. And they're still to this day exploring that. But it was something that was great about Wally at the time, where in this moment, Barry would have never hesitated to go in and do this because of the scientist that he was. Wally wasn't that guy, and he explored this differently. I loved the sense of, I'm nervous. What's going to happen here? Because Wally had wound up in so many wacky places, almost died due to the Speed Force. If it wasn't for Linda as a tether, he would have wound up there. Not knowing where he was going to go and what was going to happen to him, I thought was something that was interesting. Now, why don't we go to it? You had mentioned that you had some questions about the Speed Force in this. What were some of your questions about the Speed Force?
Okay, well, one of the big points of this miniseries that's made, and I think it is a really neat touch, reinforcing the dominant theme, how different and ultimately incompatible these two universes are, is the fact that the Speed Force does not exist in the Marvel Universe. There is no Speed Force there. Now, I have not read Flash Rebirth. Okay, I'm waiting for the hardcover that's coming out in a couple of months. I have it pre-ordered already. But my understanding when I was doing the research for this, just to find out, okay, what exactly is the Speed Force and so forth, apparently in Flash Rebirth number 4, and I'm depending on Wikipedia for this, by the way, which I tell my students, never depend on Wikipedia for anything, but here I go. Max Mercury explains the genesis of the Speed Force as follows. It's a product of Barry Allen. Quote, when Allen runs, he generates the kinetic wall between the present and the time barrier. It's an electrical energy that exists in every dimension, every universe, and every era. It touches every part of reality, and so forth. It's the all-encompassing flash fact, unquote. And I guess maybe it's not really every part of reality. Well, here's at least it wasn't in 2003.
Here's the other thing, though, and I guess if you want to get really geeky about it, you could look at it this way. Being that this is a different universe, and it's so different, depending on how much time Wally had spent in the Marvel Universe, could he eventually, let's go under the theory that maybe there is a way to tap into the Speed Force from the Marvel Universe. Could it be that the universes are so incompatible that Wally didn't know how to do that? Going kind of on that level. I guess as a fan, I love this kind of stuff because I think as fans you can debate this kind of stuff. And I love when, realistically, if you really want to as a fan, it's fantasy fiction, there's things that don't occur on the panels else. Wally wasn't there long enough, and in this situation, why would he have been there long enough to be able to have tapped into it? If Wally had spent years in the Marvel Universe, would he have eventually found a way to tap into it? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe the question is, there is no way to tap into the Marvel Universe, and maybe Max Mercury's wrong.
Well, I think, and I think, it gets to the far simpler explanation that, we've got basically a later story that preempts, or whatever. But, yeah, I mean, there are ways, of course, that Jeff Johns or someone could go back and reconcile all this, that what he does so well,
I think any fan could, though. I think I'm a fan of doing that, where you can, if you really want to, because it's never been fully defined, that Wally was not there. All we know is that Wally here could not tap into it.
Yeah.
But if you look at the amount of time he was there, could Wally eventually do that? We've seen Wally lose his powers before and then eventually tap into them again.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
Up on the website, I put some really cool details about, they're doing a search for comic fans who are comic fans, retailers, creators, who are interested in being a part of Comic-Con Episode 4 A Fan's Hope. And really they're looking for people who are going to the 2010 Comic-Con International in San Diego. They're looking for retailers, like I said, creators, comic fans, to be like part of the cast of the original, eccentric, funny, touching, and mildly obsessive people that will capture the excitement, enthusiasm, joy, and passion of comic book, anime, sci-fi, and fantasy lovers anywhere. If Comic-Con International will be a highlight of your year, and if you have a story to share about your passion, let us know. Join the fellowship, take part in this epic documentary, and write us at comiccon@gmail.com. That's Comic-Con, COMICCONDOC @gmail.com. Include your name, phone number, a picture, and tell us your story. So we're looking for people to make a part of this. It's really, really kind of cool. So if you're interested in any of that, tell them your story and see if you can be a part of it. I think it's very cool. There's more details up on our website, but definitely if you're interested in that, it's comiccondoc@gmail.com. So very cool. I wanted to shout that one out on the show, and I think it's very cool. Our sponsors for this episode are ComicCollectorLive.com. ComicCollectorLive.com, your comic book management source. Want to remind everyone you can hear us every week on Get Your Geek On Radio. That's GetYourGeekOnRadio.com, a radio station committed to making geek chic. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Also sponsoring us this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, you can check out Birds of Prey number 3, written by Gail Simone, art by Ed Bennis, cover by Cliff Chang. The explosive first story arc of Birds of Prey continues. Pursued by an unstoppable killer, the birds are forced to run a gauntlet of insane gang members and corrupt cops out to kill them, all while trying to stop a teammate from dying in front of their eyes. The meanest Birds of Prey villain yet is calling for blood and won't stop until she gets it. Regularly, $2.99, 40% off, only $1.79. DCBService.com is your pre-order source. Definitely in this day and age when comic books are getting more and more expensive, you're going to want to check out DCBService.com to get those discounts. Also sponsoring us is InStockTrades.com, where you can check out Batman the Cult. After we're done with JLA Avengers, we're going to Batman the Cult. Regularly, $19.99, 47% off, only $10.59. Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson. This is a masterpiece. Thank you, InStockTrades.com, for supporting us with those incredible discounts. Jim, our next episode is going to be Speeding Bullets, and we're going to continue chatting JLA Avengers number 1 with Kent Hare. So we're going to be doing these JLA Avengers segments kind of in the same fashion all the way through until we're done with the series, because we want to make sure we're getting to some of the older material while we're covering just the amazing events that are going on during this year of DC's 75th anniversary. Because, dude, I don't know about you, week after week, I'm opening up my box, and I'm having a really tough time deciding what are the first books that I want to read. And that's just such a great thing right now.
Yeah, getting excited and just having fun. Really just going, yay, with my stack each week has been just, I don't know, it's. I thought after, Blackest Night, I'm like, okay, would things calm down? No, it's just, it keeps chugging, it keeps building and going and going and going. I'm like, yay, yay.
This is no insult to Blackest Night. I think things have gotten even better after Blackest Night. And I don't mean that in any way. I loved that event. It was huge. It was cool and things like that. But it's like spinning out of that. And I think that was the intention with the event. The event was meant to be this big kickoff to, well, of course, quote-unquote, Brightest Day. But I think we're seeing across the line some really interesting things going on right now. And I can't remember the last light week I've had where I've really felt like, there's a couple titles that are really at the top of my stack, and the rest of them are ones that I can kind of get to when I want to. I don't have that right now. No. And that's a cool feeling to have when you're opening up your box, because at the end of the school year for me, and I know you're going through a lot of stresses at your work right now, this is a crazy time, and I need my weekly comic dose because it's my break away from everything, and it's so great right now to be opening up my box every week and being like, oh my gosh, look at all this cool stuff I have to read. It really just takes me out of everything else that's going on. And I'm so thrilled. So it's just such a great time right now to be reading comics. I don't remember a time where I haven't had like a light week. And a light week is more, where I don't have my big books, my like top favorites. I don't remember a light week, Jim, in a good couple months. What I would consider a light one.
It's been something that's, it's a great problem to have.
So we will see everyone. Actually, I'm almost done with editing the second part of the JLA Avengers segment. So this one's definitely going to be back a little bit sooner. So we'll see you in a few days.
Bye.